What happens when one kiss destroys your entire plan to stay invisible? Arya Vale was supposed to be nobody, just a bartender who'd buried her deadly past 5 years ago. But the moment she saw that red laser dot painting a target on Dante Moretti's chest, instinct overrode reason. She had 3 seconds to choose: let a man die or blow her cover forever. So she walked across that crowded room and kissed a stranger. One kiss, one crime lord, one shattered disguise. And now, the people who killed her father know exactly where to find her. Stay with me until the end. Hit like and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The Velvet Rose wasn't the kind of bar where people came to forget their troubles. It was the kind where troubles came looking for you. Arya Vale had learned that truth within her first week working there, watching silk-suited men negotiate deals over whiskey that cost more than her monthly rent, their conversations punctuated by laughter that never quite reached their eyes. She'd learned to read the room like a second language. Which tables to avoid, which glances meant danger, which smiles were really warnings. Tonight, the air tasted wrong. She felt it the moment she stepped behind the mahogany bar for her shift, that electric prickle across her skin that her father had once called the predator's instinct. 5 years of working regular jobs, of being nobody special, and still her body remembered what her mind tried desperately to forget. "You're jumpy tonight," Marco observed, sliding empty glasses across the bar toward her. The older bartender had worked at the Velvet Rose for 15 years, and his weathered face showed every one of them. "Something wrong?" "Just tired," Arya lied smoothly, already scanning the crowd. Friday nights always drew the city's elite and its underworld in equal measure, a dangerous mixing of legitimate wealth and blood money that management carefully cultivated. But tonight felt different, heavier. Marco studied her for a moment longer, then shrugged. "Well, wake up. We've got a special guest tonight, Dante Moretti himself." Arya's hands stilled on the glass she'd been polishing. Even people who'd successfully divorced themselves from the criminal underworld knew that name. Dante Moretti, the man who'd consolidated 3 rival families under his control in less than 2 years, who ruled the city's shadows with an iron fist wrapped in expensive Italian leather. The man whose empire had once been at war with her father's organization. "Which table?" she asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "VIP section, corner booth. Try not to stare. He doesn't like attention." Marco paused. "Also doesn't tip, but that's between us." Arya permitted herself a quick glance across the dimly lit space. The VIP section occupied an elevated platform at the back, separated from the main floor by velvet ropes and 2 very large security guards. She could just make out a figure in the corner booth, shadows playing across sharp features and dark hair. She turned back to her work, mixing drinks on autopilot while her mind raced. Dante Moretti had no reason to remember her. She'd been 15 when her father died, kept carefully separate from his business dealings. She'd changed her appearance since then anyway. Darker hair, different style. 5 years of intentional anonymity between that girl and this woman. Still, being in the same room as someone from that world made her skin crawl. An hour passed in the usual rhythm of a busy Friday. Arya served drinks, collected empty glasses, deflected unwanted advances with practiced ease. She was just starting to relax, to convince herself that tonight was no different from any other night when she saw it. A glint of light from the building across the street. 2nd floor, 3rd window from the left. Her blood turned to ice. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, just a brief reflection, easily dismissed. But Arya had spent her childhood learning to spot exactly this kind of thing. Her father had made sure she could identify a threat before it materialized, a skill that had probably saved her life when his enemies had come for their family. A skill she'd promised herself she'd never need to use again. She set down the martini she'd been preparing with hands that wanted to shake, forcing herself to breathe normally. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe it was just a window reflection, a trick of the light, paranoia from being in a room with Dante Moretti. Then she saw the laser sight, a tiny red dot, barely visible in the bar's ambient lighting, dancing across the wall behind the VIP section, tracking, searching, finding its target. The dot settled on Dante Moretti's chest, right over his heart. Time seemed to crystallize. Arya's mind performed calculations at lightning speed. Distance from her position to the VIP section, 40 feet. Obstacles in the way, 3 tables, approximately 15 people. Time until shot, seconds, maybe less. Likelihood that security would react in time, 0. Likelihood that the sniper would try again if this shot failed, certain. Likelihood that she could walk away and pretend she hadn't seen anything, high. Likelihood that she could live with herself if she did, non-existent. Fuck, Arya breathed. She was moving before conscious thought caught up with action, her body reverting to training she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. She vaulted over the bar with fluid grace, ignoring Marco's startled shout. Patrons turned to stare as she wove through the crowd, but she barely registered them. Her entire focus narrowed to that red dot, still steady on Dante Moretti's chest. The security guard saw her coming, already moving to intercept. She had maybe 3 seconds before they stopped her, maybe 4, before the sniper pulled the trigger. Not enough time to shout a warning, not enough time to explain, only enough time for something crazy. Dante Moretti looked up as she approached, his dark eyes widening slightly. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if not for the cold calculation in his gaze. He started to speak, probably to order her removed. Arya didn't let him. She grabbed his expensive silk tie, yanked him forward, and kissed him. For one frozen heartbeat, the entire bar seemed to hold its breath. Dante went rigid with shock, his hands coming up automatically to her waist. Whether to push her away or pull her closer, even he probably didn't know. The window across the street exploded. Glass and wood shrapnel tore through the air where Dante's head had been 2 seconds earlier. The bullet buried itself in the leather booth with a muted thump, and suddenly the bar erupted into chaos. People screamed, diving for cover. Security pulled weapons, shouting into radios. Alarms began to wail. Through it all, Arya kept her lips locked on Dante Moretti's, her body shielding his from the sniper's angle. When she finally pulled back, his eyes had gone from shocked to something far more dangerous, a predatory interest that made her stomach drop. "Down!" she snapped, shoving him toward the floor as his security finally reached them. Hands grabbed her roughly, yanking her away from Dante. She didn't resist. There was no point. The VIP section had descended into controlled chaos, security forming a human shield around their boss while others moved toward the exit. "Wait!" Dante's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Calm, controlled, absolutely terrifying in its composure. "Let her go." The hands released her immediately. Arya stumbled back, her heart hammering. Dante straightened from his crouch, brushing broken glass from his sleeve with movements that were almost casual. Almost. But Arya could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw had tightened. He was furious. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Nobody," Arya said, which was both true and the biggest lie she'd ever told. I saw the laser sight and I reacted. I didn't think." "You didn't think?" Dante's laugh was short and utterly devoid of humor. "You jumped into a potential line of fire to save a complete stranger, and you didn't think." One of his security team, a mountain of a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. "Boss, we need to move, now." "In a moment, Vincent." Dante's gaze never left Arya's face. "How did you know?" "Know what?" "How did you spot the sniper? My own security didn't see it until the shot was fired. But you—" He gestured at the 40 feet of distance between them. "You were all the way across the room, and somehow you knew." Arya's mind raced, searching for a plausible lie. "I used to date a cop. He was paranoid, always pointing out security cameras and sightlines. I guess some of it stuck. It was a good lie. Not too elaborate, not too simple. Completely unprovable." Dante didn't believe it for a second. "Vincent," he said, still looking at Arya, "get her name and contact information. I'll want to speak with her again." "That's really not necessary," Arya started, but Vincent was already moving toward her with the inexorability of a glacier. "It's very necessary," Dante corrected. "Someone just tried to kill me, and the only reason I'm not dead is because of you. That makes you either the luckiest bystander in this city's history or something much more interesting." He smiled, and it was like watching a shark bare its teeth. "I'm very curious to find out which." Before Arya could respond, the main doors burst open. Police, at least a dozen officers, weapons drawn. Behind them, she could see the flash of emergency lights painting the street red and blue. "Everyone stay where you are," the lead officer shouted. Dante sighed. And here comes the complicated part. He looked at Arya one more time, something unreadable flickering across his face. Don't leave the city. We're not done. Then he was moving, his security team flowing around him like a well-oiled machine. They had him out a back exit before the police could fully secure the scene, disappearing into the night with the efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Arya stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Around her, officers were separating witnesses, securing the crime scene, barking orders into radios. Marco appeared at her elbow, his face pale. "Are you insane?" he hissed. "Do you have any idea who that was?" "I saved his life," Arya said numbly. "You kissed Dante Moretti in front of half the city's underworld. You might as well have painted a target on your back." The words hit her like cold water. Marco was right. In trying to save a life, she'd done exactly what she'd spent 5 years avoiding. She'd made herself visible to the very people she needed to stay hidden from. A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you some questions." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of police interviews, witness statements, and increasingly invasive questions. Arya stuck to her story. She was a bartender, she saw the laser sight, she reacted without thinking. No, she didn't know Dante Moretti. No, she'd never been involved in anything criminal. No, she couldn't think of anyone who might want to harm him, which was perhaps the most obvious lie of all. It was past 3 in the morning when they finally let her go. The Velvet Rose had been completely shut down, yellow police tape cordoning off the entrance. Arya stood on the sidewalk, her jacket pulled tight against the night chill, trying to figure out what to do next. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. The back window rolled down, revealing Vincent's scarred face. "Get in." "I don't think so," Arya said, already backing away. "Wasn't a request." Vincent's expression didn't change. "Boss wants to see you, now." "Tell your boss I said—" The click of a safety, being released, cut her off. Vincent hadn't drawn a weapon, didn't need to. The implication was clear enough. Arya's options flashed through her mind. Run. They'd catch her. Fight. There were at least 3 of them in the car. Scream. The police had already left, and who would help her anyway? Or comply and hope she could talk her way out of whatever this was. She got in the car. Vincent slid over to make room, and the sedan pulled away from the curb before she'd even fastened her seatbelt. Arya studied her surroundings with the careful attention to detail her father had drilled into her. 2 men in front, driver and another guard. Vincent beside her. Doors probably locked. Windows tinted so dark she couldn't see out. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Mr. Moretti's residence." "And if I'd rather not?" Vincent finally looked at her, and there was something almost like respect in his eyes. "Then you should have thought of that before you kissed him in front of 200 witnesses." "Fair point." They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the downtown core for the city's expensive outskirts. When they finally stopped, Arya found herself staring at a mansion that looked like it had been transplanted from a European postcard. All stone walls and iron gates, security cameras tracking their every move. Vincent escorted her inside personally, his hand on her elbow more guidance than restraint. But the message was clear. She wasn't leaving until Dante Moretti decided she could. The interior matched the exterior, expensive, tasteful, and coldly beautiful. Marble floors, original artwork, furniture that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Vincent led her through a series of hallways to a heavy wooden door, knocked twice, then stepped aside. "He's waiting," was all he said. Arya took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked through. The room beyond was a study, lined floor to ceiling with books that actually looked red. A fireplace crackled against the far wall, casting warm light across dark wood furniture and Persian rugs. And behind a massive desk sat Dante Moretti, now changed out of his bullet-holed jacket into a simple black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit." Arya remained standing. "I'd rather not. I'd rather not have been shot at tonight, but here we are." Dante's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "Sit down, miss." Veil. Arya Veil. Recognition didn't flicker across his face, which meant either he didn't remember her father or he was an excellent liar. Probably both. "Sit down, Miss Veil, please." The please somehow made it more of a command than the original order. Arya sat, perching on the edge of the chair like she might need to bolt at any moment. Dante studied her for a long moment, fingers steepled beneath his chin. You have very good instincts. I watch a lot of action movies. You identified a sniper position in under 3 seconds, calculated trajectory and timing, and executed a response that saved my life. That's not movie knowledge, that's training. Arya's stomach tightened. I already told you. You lied, Dante interrupted calmly. The police believed you because they wanted to. Civilians who witness crimes are always given the benefit of the doubt. But I'm not the police, Miss Vale, and I don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. He leaned forward slightly. So let's try this again. Who trained you? Nobody. Wrong answer. It's the only answer I have. They stared at each other across the desk, neither blinking. Arya could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, but she kept her expression neutral. Her father had taught her that too. Never show fear, even when you're terrified. Finally, Dante sat back. Vincent did some digging while you were with the police. Arya Vale, 25 years old, employed at the Velvet Rose for 6 months. Before that, various bartending jobs around the city. Before that, he paused. Nothing. Your entire life history begins 5 years ago, as if you materialized fully formed at 20. I moved here from out of state. Fresh start, new city. From where? Does it matter? Everything matters when someone tries to kill me. Dante's voice hardened. And the woman who saved me has a past full of conspicuous blanks. Arya met his gaze steadily. Maybe I just value my privacy. And maybe you're in witness protection, or running from an abusive ex, or hiding from people who want you dead. He tilted his head. Or maybe you have connections to the very world that just tried to end my life. The last statement landed like a punch. Arya forced herself not to react, but something must have shown on her face because Dante's expression shifted to something almost like satisfaction. There it is, he murmured. The truth. You don't know anything about me. I know you saved my life. I know you're lying about why. And I know that in approximately he glanced at his watch. 6 hours, everyone in this city's underworld is going to know your face and name, the woman who kissed Dante Moretti and lived to tell about it. Dread pooled in Arya's stomach. What? Someone filmed it. The kiss, the shot, all of it. It's already spreading through certain circles. Dante's expression was unreadable. By morning, you'll be infamous. No! The word came out strangled. This couldn't be happening. 5 years of careful invisibility, destroyed in one impulsive moment. No, you have to. There has to be a way to stop it. There isn't. Information moves too fast these days, he paused. Of course, there are ways to survive being infamous if you know what you're doing. Arya's eyes narrowed. What are you offering? Protection. You stay here, under my security, until we figure out who tried to kill me and why. In exchange, you tell me the truth about who you really are. And if I refuse? Dante shrugged. Then you walk out that door and take your chances with whoever comes looking for you. I'm sure your action movie knowledge will serve you well. It was a trap dressed up as an offer, and they both knew it. But Arya could see the logic too. Once her face was circulating through the criminal underworld, staying alone was a death sentence. At least here, surrounded by Dante's security, she had a chance. A chance and a whole new set of dangers. How long? She asked. However long it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have, Dante said, throwing her earlier words back at her with a slight smile. Do we have a deal, Miss Vale? Arya looked around the study, at the expensive books, the carefully curated artwork, the fireplace that probably cost more than her entire apartment. This was a gilded cage, beautiful and deadly. Once she stepped into it, getting out would be nearly impossible. But what choice did she have? I want ground rules, she said finally. I'm a guest, not a prisoner. I can come and go. No. Excuse me? You're a potential target and a walking question mark. Until I know exactly what I'm dealing with, you stay inside these walls. Dante's tone left no room for argument. Non-negotiable. Then I want my own room. Privacy. And I don't answer questions I don't want to answer. You'll have a room. Privacy when reasonable. But if I ask you something directly related to tonight or to your past connections with people who might want me dead, you answer honestly, or our arrangement ends immediately." It was still a terrible deal. Arya knew it, and from the look in Dante's eyes, so did he. But terrible was better than dead. "Fine," she said. "1 week. That's all I'm agreeing to. We'll revisit the timeline as needed." Dante stood, moving around the desk with the fluid grace of a predator. He extended his hand. "Welcome to your new temporary home, Miss Vale." Arya stared at his hand for a long moment before taking it. His grip was firm, warm, and somehow threatening despite the civilized gesture. "Thank you," she said, though the words tasted like ashes. "Don't thank me yet." Dante released her hand. "Vincent will show you to your room. We'll talk more in the morning, once you've had time to process everything." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Miss Vale? That kiss tonight, quick thinking, reckless, insane, and it probably saved both our lives. But don't ever touch me without permission again." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Arya lifted her chin. "Don't put yourself in positions where strangers have to save you." For a heartbeat, she thought she'd gone too far. Then Dante laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising and genuine. "I like you," he said, sounding almost surprised himself. "That's either very good or very bad for both of us." Then he was gone, leaving Arya alone in the study with nothing but the crackling fire and the weight of the choice she'd just made. Vincent appeared in the doorway moments later. "This way." He led her up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, down another hallway lined with closed doors. The room he showed her into was larger than her entire apartment, a 4-poster bed, attached bathroom, even a sitting area with a view of the gardens below. "Clothes in the closet should fit," Vincent said. "Bathroom's stocked. Don't try the windows, they're alarmed. Don't try the doors after midnight. Guards patrol the halls. Don't try to leave the grounds." "I get it," Arya interrupted. "I'm a prisoner with nice accommodations." Vincent's scarred face softened slightly. "You're a complication the boss doesn't know how to handle yet. That makes you dangerous to yourself and everyone around you. Stay in here, stay quiet, and maybe you'll survive long enough to walk back out." Inspiring pep talk. Not trying to inspire, just telling you how it is. He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, what you did tonight, spotting that sniper, taking action, most people would have frozen. You didn't. That counts for something." Then he was gone, and Arya was alone. She moved to the window, looking out at gardens she wasn't allowed to walk through, surrounded by walls she wasn't allowed to cross. Somewhere in the city, a video of her kissing Dante Moretti was spreading through the underworld like wildfire. Somewhere, people who'd known her father might be recognizing her face. Somewhere, the person who'd tried to kill Dante tonight was probably planning their next move. And she was trapped in the middle of all of it, tied to a man she barely knew and a world she'd sworn to leave behind. Arya pressed her forehead against the cool glass and let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding all night. This wasn't temporary. The moment she'd kissed Dante Moretti, she'd sealed her fate. There would be no going back to her quiet bartender life. No more hiding in plain sight. The past she'd buried had just clawed its way to the surface. And the worst part? Some small, reckless part of her, the part that had been suffocating under 5 years of careful mediocrity, felt alive for the first time since her father died. Outside, the city lights glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold and indifferent to the chaos unfolding in its shadows. Arya watched them until her eyes grew heavy, until exhaustion finally pulled her toward the massive bed. Tomorrow, she'd figure out her next move. Tomorrow, she'd find a way out of this gilded cage. Tonight, she just needed to survive. She collapsed onto the bed, still fully dressed, her last conscious thought a bitter prayer to no one in particular. Please let this be the worst decision I've ever made. Because if it wasn't, if things got worse from here, she didn't know if she'd survive what came next. Sunlight sliced through the curtains like a knife, dragging Arya from sleep into immediate, disorienting awareness. For 3 confused seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The sniper, the kiss, Dante Moretti's predatory smile as he'd trapped her in this gilded prison. She sat up, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her mouth tasting like regret and stale adrenaline. The clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m. She'd slept less than 5 hours, but her body hummed with nervous energy that made rest impossible anyway. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Vale?" A woman's voice, polite but firm. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence for breakfast in 30 minutes. Requests. What a delightful euphemism for commands. "I'll be there," Arya called back, then dragged herself toward the bathroom. The shower was everything her apartment's sad excuse for plumbing wasn't. Hot, powerful, with enough water pressure to actually rinse shampoo from her hair. Arya stood under the spray longer than necessary, letting the heat work some of the tension from her shoulders. Vincent had been right about the clothes, too. The walk-in closet held an array of options in exactly her size, everything from casual jeans to cocktail dresses. She chose simple black pants and a gray sweater, dressing like she was armoring up for battle. Because that's exactly what breakfast with Dante Moretti would be. A battle disguised as hospitality. The same woman who'd knocked earlier was waiting outside her door. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes that cataloged everything without seeming to look directly at anything. "I'm Teresa," she said. "I manage the household. If you need anything during your stay, come to me first. And if I need to leave?" Teresa's expression didn't change. "Then you come to me so I can explain why that's not possible. This way, please." She led Arya back down the grand staircase, through hallways that looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more revealing of the careful thought behind every detail. Original paintings, antique furniture, everything expensive but nothing ostentatious. The home of someone who had money and power but didn't need to prove it. They emerged into a breakfast room flooded with morning light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens Arya had seen from her bedroom, and at a table set for two, Dante Moretti sat reading a newspaper like he hadn't nearly died 12 hours ago. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. "Miss Vale, I wasn't sure you'd actually come. You made it clear I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice." He folded the newspaper, gesturing to the seat across from him. "You could have barricaded yourself in your room, refused to cooperate, made both our lives significantly more difficult. Instead, you're here. That shows wisdom, or resignation to my circumstances. I've found the two often look similar." Dante nodded to Teresa, who'd remained hovering near the doorway. "Tell Maria we're ready." Within minutes, staff appeared bearing platters of food. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, prepared 3 different ways. Bacon, sausage, enough to feed a small army. Arya's stomach growled despite her anxiety. She hadn't eaten since before her shift at the Velvet Rose, and her body was making its priorities very clear. Dante watched her pile food onto her plate with undisguised amusement. "When was your last meal?" "Yesterday afternoon." Arya bit into a croissant that was probably worth more than she made in an hour. It tasted like butter in heaven. "Eating before a shift makes me sluggish." "Practical." He poured coffee from a silver carafe, then slid the cup across to her without asking if she wanted it. The presumption should have annoyed her, but the coffee smelled incredible, and she needed the caffeine too badly to argue. "Vincent's report on you makes for interesting reading." Arya's hand stilled halfway to her mouth. "He investigated me?" "Of course. You saved my life, which means you're either an ally I should cultivate or a threat I need to neutralize. Due diligence." The casual way he said it, like investigating people was as normal as checking the weather, sent ice down Arya's spine. "And which am I? Ally or threat?" Still deciding, Dante took a measured sip of his own coffee. "Your employment history checks out. Multiple bartending jobs over 5 years, good references from all of them, no criminal record, no suspicious financial activity. On the surface, you're exactly what you claim to be, a woman who moved to the city for a fresh start and has been quietly building a normal life. But your behavior last night was anything but normal. You spotted a professional sniper from 40 feet away in a crowded bar. You assessed trajectory, timing, and threat level in under 3 seconds. You executed a response that required both courage and tactical thinking." He leaned forward slightly. "That's not bartender training, Miss Vale. That's military or law enforcement, or something else entirely." Arya met his gaze steadily while her mind raced through options. Lying hadn't worked last night. Deflection would only make him more suspicious. which left fragments of truth carefully curated to satisfy his curiosity without revealing everything. My father was paranoid, she said slowly. He grew up in a bad neighborhood, saw things that stayed with him. When I was a kid, he taught me to always watch for exits, to notice when people were watching me, to trust my instincts about danger. Not a lie, just incomplete. I guess some of that stuck. Dante studied her face like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. Your father, is he still alive? No, he died 5 years ago. How? Does it matter? Everything matters? The same words he'd used last night delivered with the same implacable certainty. How did he die, Miss Vale? Arya's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. This was dangerous territory, every word a potential landmine. He was murdered. Wrong place, wrong time. The police never found who did it. Truth and lies woven together so tightly, even she sometimes lost track of the boundaries between them. Her father had been murdered, just not randomly. And the police hadn't found his killers because those killers had connections that ran deeper than any investigation. Dante's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry, losing a parent to violence, there's no recovering from that, only learning to live with the hole it leaves. The unexpected sympathy caught Arya off guard. She'd expected interrogation, suspicion, more pressure, not understanding from a man whose own life was built on violence. You sound like you're speaking from experience, she said carefully. My father was killed when I was 19. Dante's voice remained level, but something dark moved behind his eyes. Car bomb. They never found all the pieces. Silence stretched between them, heavy with shared trauma they'd both learned to weaponize or bury. Arya recognized the same calculated emptiness in Dante's face that she saw in her own mirror. The look of someone who'd learned that showing grief was the same as showing weakness. So we both have dead fathers and trust issues, Arya said finally. That doesn't explain why I'm still here. No, it doesn't. Dante set down his cup. What explains that is the video. Dread coiled in Arya's stomach. You said it was spreading through the underworld. How bad is it? See for yourself. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table. The video was shot from a phone, shaky but clear enough. Arya watched herself vault over the bar, weave through the crowd, grab Dante's tie and kiss him. The angle caught everything, the moment of shock on his face, the window exploding behind them, the chaos that followed. Someone had even added slow-motion effects to the kiss itself, turning it into something almost romantic. The caption read, Mystery Woman Saves Dante Moretti with Kiss of Life. Who is she? It has 40,000 views, Dante said quietly, as of an hour ago. Comments are disabled, but it's been shared across every criminal network in the city and several outside it. Your face is now recognizable to everyone who matters in my world. Arya pushed the phone back across the table, feeling sick. So what happens now? Now we wait to see who makes the first move. That's not a plan. That's hoping nothing goes wrong. It's the only plan that makes sense until we know who tried to kill me and whether they know about you. Dante reclaimed his phone. 3 possibilities. 1. Last night was a professional hit ordered by a rival and you're irrelevant to their interests. 2. Last night was a message from someone inside my organization and saving me has made you a target by association. 3. Someone recognizes me from before and saving you just painted a target on both our backs. Dante's eyes sharpened. Before what? Arya cursed herself silently. She'd been too tired, too off balance, let the truth slip through her defenses. Before I became a bartender, before my fresh start. That's not an answer. It's all you're getting. They stared at each other across the remains of breakfast, and Arya could see him calculating, weighing his curiosity against his need for her cooperation. Finally, he nodded. For now. He stood, buttoning his jacket with precise movements. I have business to attend to. Vincent will be stationed outside your room. If you need anything, ask him. I'm still a prisoner then. You're still under protection. There's a difference. Is there? Dante paused in the doorway, looking back at her. Yes. Prisoners don't get a choice about staying. You can leave whenever you want, Miss Vale. Just understand that the moment you do, I can't protect you from what's coming." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Arya sat alone in the breakfast room, surrounded by more food than she could eat and more wealth than she'd ever possess, feeling the trap close tighter around her with every passing minute. Teresa reappeared as if summoned. "Mr. Moretti has given you access to the library and the gym. The gardens are off limits without escort. Is there anything you need?" What Arya needed was a time machine to undo last night. Failing that, she needed information, leverage, some way to take control of a situation that was spiraling further from her grasp every second. "The library," she said. "I'd like to see it." If she was going to survive this, she needed to understand the man who held her fate in his hands. And people, Arya had learned, revealed themselves through the books they kept. The library turned out to be a 2-story room that smelled like leather and old paper and secrets. Shelves climbed to a vaulted ceiling, accessed by one of those rolling ladders that belonged in movies about eccentric millionaires. Arya ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles that ranged from classical literature to military history to books on philosophy and game theory. Not what she'd expected from a crime lord. She pulled down a worn copy of The Prince by Machiavelli, flipping through pages that showed signs of repeated reading. Passages were underlined, margins filled with neat handwritten notes in Italian. Arya's Italian was rusty but functional, another gift from her father who'd believed in knowing your enemy's languages. One notation caught her eye. "Power unused is power wasted, but power displayed is power diluted." He reads that one every year. Arya spun to find Vincent standing in the doorway, his massive frame somehow managing not to look threatening. Somehow. "I didn't hear you come in," she said. "That's the idea." Vincent moved into the room with surprising quiet for a man his size. "Boss wanted me to check on you, make sure you weren't trying to climb out windows or pick locks." "Would it work if I was?" "No, but it'd be entertaining to watch you try." He settled into a leather armchair that creaked under his weight. "You're handling this better than most people would." "What's the alternative? Panic?" "That helps no one." True enough. If Vincent studied her with those careful eyes that missed nothing. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair?" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Last night, when you saw that laser sight, what went through your head?" Arya turned the question over, examining it for traps. "Honestly, training. My body reacted before my brain caught up. I saw the threat, calculated the response time, and moved. That's not normal civilian thinking." "No," Arya admitted. "It's not." "So who trained you? Really?" She could lie again. Stick to the story about her paranoid father, the cop boyfriend, all the carefully constructed fiction she'd built around her past. But Vincent had saved Dante's life dozens of times. She could see it in the scars he carried, the way he moved, the professional assessment in his gaze. He'd recognize a fellow soldier when he saw one. "My father," she said quietly. "He wanted me to be able to protect myself in a world that doesn't care about fair fights or innocence. He taught me to shoot, to fight, to read situations and people. I was 15 when he died, and everything he taught me died with him. I haven't touched a gun or thrown a punch in 5 years." Not entirely true. She'd kept up basic training, unable to fully let go of the skills that had become part of her DNA, but close enough to truth that Vincent might believe it. He nodded slowly. "That explains some things. Not everything, but some." He stood, moving toward the door. "Boss is meeting with people all day trying to figure out who ordered the hit. You should probably stay visible. Library, your room, places where we can keep eyes on you." "And Miss Vale?" "Yes?" "Whatever you're running from, it's going to catch up eventually. They always do. Question is whether you'll be ready when it does." Then he was gone, leaving Arya alone with her thoughts and a library full of books that suddenly felt less like comfort and more like evidence of how little she actually understood about Dante Moretti. The day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Arya tried to read but couldn't focus, her mind constantly returning to the video, to the 40,000 people who now knew her face, to the probability that somewhere in those views was someone who remembered a 15-year-old girl whose father had been executed in the same war that had eventually brought Dante to power. Lunch arrived on a tray brought by a silent staff member. Arya picked at it without appetite. Dinner was the same. Beautifully prepared food that tasted like ash in a mouth gone dry with anxiety. Night fell, and with it came a kind of restless energy that made staying in her room impossible. Arya paced until the walls felt like they were closing in, then ventured into the hallway. Vincent was exactly where he'd said he'd be, stationed outside her door with the patient immobility of a man who'd done a lot of waiting in his career. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can't think? Can't breathe? This house is too quiet." "Quiet's good. Means nothing's trying to kill you." Yet. Arya wrapped her arms around herself. "Is there anywhere I can go that isn't a cage with nice furniture?" Vincent considered this, then stood. "Gym's on the 3rd floor, no windows, only one entrance. I can station myself outside while you blow off steam. Boss said you could use it." The gym turned out to be serious. Professional equipment, heavy bags, a full mat for sparring. Arya changed into workout clothes she found in a locker. Of course, there were workout clothes in her size, and approached the heavy bag like greeting an old friend. She started slow, remembering the basics her father had drilled into her. Jab, cross, hook. Keep your guard up. Rotate your hips. She'd been good once before grief and guilt had made her abandon everything connected to her old life. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The rhythm built, punches flowing faster and harder until sweat soaked her shirt, and her knuckles ached, and the anxiety that had been eating her alive all day finally started to loosen its grip. She worked until her arms felt like lead, until her lungs burned, until the only thing in her head was the satisfying thud of fist meeting leather. "Your form's sloppy." Arya spun to find Dante leaning against the doorframe, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders, but alert. Always alert. "I'm out of practice," she said, breathing hard. "I can see that. You're dropping your right hand after the cross, leaving yourself open." He pushed off the wall, moving onto the mat. "Hit me." "Excuse me?" "You need a moving target. I need to see what you're actually capable of." He raised his hands in a classic guard position. "Hit me, Miss Vale." This was a terrible idea. Arya knew it was a terrible idea, but the adrenaline was still singing through her veins, and part of her, the part that had been suffocating under 5 years of forced normalcy, wanted to see what he could do. She struck fast, aiming for his ribs. He blocked effortlessly, countering with a controlled jab that stopped an inch from her face. "Faster," he said. They moved around each other, trading strikes that never quite connected. Dante was better than her, smoother, more experienced, with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. But Arya was quicker, and desperation made her creative. "You've had professional training," Dante said, blocking a kick aimed at his knee. "Not just self-defense classes. Real combat training." "My father was thorough." "Your father was military, or private security, or something else that required teaching a teenage girl how to fight like she meant it." He caught her wrist mid-punch, holding it steady. "Why?" They were close now, close enough that Arya could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his skin. Her heart hammered, and she couldn't tell if it was from exertion or proximity to a man who was simultaneously her captor and her protector. "Because the world is dangerous," she said quietly, "and he wanted me to survive it." Did he know he was going to die? The question hit harder than any punch. Arya tried to pull her wrist free, but Dante's grip remained firm, not painful, just inescapable. "Let go," she said. Did he know? Yes. The word came out broken. He knew they were coming for him. He sent me away that night, told me to run and never look back. And I did. I ran like a coward while they killed him. She hadn't meant to say it. 5 years of therapy and self-deception, and one question from Dante Moretti had cracked her open like an egg. He released her wrist but didn't step back. "You were 15. Survival isn't cowardice. Tell that to the guilt I wake up with every morning." "I do. Every day." Dante's expression had gone soft in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "My father's death was my fault. I was reckless, made enemies I shouldn't have, drew attention our family couldn't afford. The bomb was meant to send me a message. He just happened to be in the car." Arya stared at him, seeing her own grief reflected back through a different lens. How do you live with it? I built something he would have been proud of, took the empire he started and made it unshakable. He paused. And I make sure that anyone who threatens what I've built regrets it thoroughly before they stop breathing. The words should have scared her. Instead, Arya felt a strange kinship with this man who'd turned grief into armor and guilt into power. They were both broken in the same way, just different in how they'd glued the pieces back together. I need to know something, she said. The hit last night. Do you know who ordered it? I have theories. Share them. Dante studied her for a long moment. Why should I? Because someone's trying to kill you, and I'm stuck in the crossfire whether I like it or not. I deserve to know what I'm up against. He nodded slowly, like she'd passed some test she hadn't known she was taking. Come with me. He led her through the house to a room she hadn't seen before, an office that made the study look casual. Monitors covered one wall, showing security feeds from what looked like half the city. A conference table dominated the center, covered in photographs and documents. Dante gestured to the photos. 3 main suspects. Antonio Greco runs the north side, has been pushing for more territory. Marco Valenti, old family, thinks I'm too young and too ruthless. And Elena Chen controls most of the drug trade, has reason to want me out of the way. Arya studied the faces. Greco looked like a thug who'd gotten lucky. Valenti had the soft appearance of someone born into wealth. But Chen, there was intelligence in her eyes. Calculation that Arya recognized. My money's on Chen, she said. Why? Because she's the only one smart enough to hire a professional instead of doing it herself. The shot last night was clean, patient. That's not passion or pride. That's business. Dante's smile was sharp with approval. That's exactly what I think. Problem is proving it and responding proportionally enough to send a message without starting a war. Can't you just... Arya made a vague gesture. Kill her. I could. But Chen has alliances that would fracture the entire power structure if she disappeared without cause. He moved to the monitors, pulling up footage from the velvet rows. No, I need proof. Evidence that points directly to her before I make a move. They stood side by side, watching the security footage replay. Arya saw herself at the bar, saw the moment she'd spotted the sniper, saw the kiss from 3 different angles. Freeze that, she said suddenly. Dante paused the feed. On screen, Arya had just started moving toward him. But in the background, partially hidden by other patrons, a man was watching her with focused intensity. Can you zoom in on him? The image enlarged, sharpening. The man was Asian, mid-30s, wearing an expensive suit. His face showed no expression, but his body language screamed awareness. That's one of Chen's lieutenants, Dante said softly. Marcus Wei. He was there. He was watching me, Arya corrected. Look at his sightline. He's not watching you or the VIP section. He's watching me specifically, and he looks surprised when I move. Dante replayed the sequence frame by frame. Wei's expression shifted from bored observation to sharp surprise to something that might have been recognition. Then he was pulling out his phone, stepping toward the exit. He knew you, Dante said, or thought he did. Arya's blood ran cold. That's not possible. Clearly it is. Dante turned to face her fully. So I'll ask you one more time, Miss Vale. Who are you really? And why would Elena Chen's right-hand man recognize you on sight? The walls were closing in again, but this time there was no gym to run to, no heavy bag to pummel. Just the truth, sharp and unavoidable, finally catching up to her after 5 years of running. Arya took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. My father's name was Michael Rossini. He ran the East Side territory before your consolidation. And Marcus Wei, her voice cracked, was the man who put 2 bullets in his head while I watched from a closet. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Dante's face had gone completely blank, the careful mask of a man processing information that changed everything he thought he knew. Rossini, he repeated finally, you're Michael Rossini's daughter. Was. I stopped being his daughter the night I ran away and let him die alone. He was at war with 3 families when he was killed, my father included. Dante's voice had gone very quiet. That's why you disappeared. You weren't just grieving. You were hiding from everyone who might want leverage against Rossini's organization. There was no organization left to leverage. Your father and Chen and Valenti carved it up within a week. Arya met his eyes steadily. And then your father died too, and you consolidated everything, and I stayed hidden because I had no idea who I could trust or who might decide an orphaned Rossini was worth killing just to close old books. So you became nobody. I became free. Dante laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've never been free, Miss Vale. You've been in prison for 5 years, just one without walls. And now? He gestured at the frozen image of Marcus Way. Now Chen knows exactly who you are, which means she knows you're here, which means... The explosion cut off whatever he was going to say next. The whole house shook, monitors flickering as power surged. Alarms began shrieking. Dante was moving before the sound faded, pulling a gun from a drawer, his entire demeanor shifting from thoughtful to lethal in a heartbeat. "Stay here," he commanded. "Like hell." "That's not a request. And I'm not asking permission." Arya grabbed a letter opener from the desk. Inadequate, but better than nothing. "If Chen's people are here for me, hiding won't help." Vincent burst through the door, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Breach on the south wall. At least 6 hostiles, professional gear. Boss, we need to move you to the safe room." "No." Dante's voice cut like steel. "We end this now. I'm tired of being hunted in my own home." "Dante," Vincent started. "Arm her," Dante said, nodding at Arya. "And get everyone into defensive positions. If Chen wants a war, we'll give her one she'll regret." Vincent looked between them, clearly torn. Then he pulled a second gun from his belt and handed it to Arya. "You remember how to use one of these?" The weight of the weapon in her hand felt like coming home and falling into hell simultaneously. "Unfortunately, yes." "Then stay close and don't shoot unless you're sure of your target." Vincent keyed his radio. "All units, code black. Defend and eliminate. No mercy." Arya racked the slide, muscle memory taking over thought. 5 years since she'd held a gun. 5 years since the night her father died, and she swore she'd never let violence touch her life again. That promise had lasted exactly as long as it took for her past to find her. And now, standing between Dante Moretti and the door, with a weapon in her hand and smoke beginning to curl under the doorframe, Arya finally admitted the truth she'd been avoiding since the moment she kissed him. She'd never escaped this world. She'd just been waiting for it to come back and claim her. The gunfire started before they reached the hallway. Sharp cracks echoed through the mansion, punctuated by shouted orders and the crash of breaking glass. Arya's training kicked in automatically. Her breathing steadied. Her grip on the weapon adjusted to perfect positioning. Her awareness expanded to take in every detail of her surroundings. 5 years of rust burned away in seconds, leaving only the cold efficiency her father had beaten into her muscle memory. Vincent led them through a side corridor away from the main combat. His radio crackled with updates, each one painting a grimmer picture. "East wing compromised. 2 men down. They're using flashbangs. Military grade. Someone get eyes on the armory before they..." The transmission cut off in static and screaming. Dante's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "How many of ours?" 23 in the house tonight," Vincent said. "Against at least 6 professionals who planned this assault. They knew our rotations, our blind spots. This was an inside job, boss." "Chen," Arya said quietly. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Marcus Way recognized me at the bar, reported back to her. She realized I was Michael Rossini's daughter, probably figured I had information or leverage she could use. "The sniper wasn't trying to kill you, Dante. It was bait." Dante stopped walking, forcing Vincent and Arya to halt with him. "Explain." "Think about it. A professional sniper misses a stationary target from 300 yards. That doesn't happen unless they meant to miss. They wanted chaos, wanted you distracted, wanted you to bring me here where they could grab both of us at once." Arya's mind raced through the tactical implications. The hit at the bar was theater. This is the real attack. Vincent swore viciously. "She's right. Chen's been quiet for weeks, no aggressive moves. We thought she was consolidating, but she was planning this. Then we adapt." Dante's eyes had gone flat and cold, the careful sophistication stripped away to reveal something far more dangerous beneath. "Vincent, get to the armory. Whatever they haven't taken, bring it. Arya, you're with me." "Boss, she's not. She's Michael Rossini's daughter. She's been trained for exactly this kind of situation. Dante looked at Arya, and she saw a question in his gaze. Unless I'm wrong about that. Arya could have lied, could have claimed her skills were rusty, that she wasn't prepared for this, that putting a gun in her hand didn't make her the 15-year-old girl who'd learned to strip and clean weapons before she learned to drive. But the sound of gunfire was getting closer, and lies were a luxury they couldn't afford. "You're not wrong," she said, "but I haven't done this in 5 years. I might be slow." Slow is better than defenseless. Dante pulled a second magazine from his jacket, handing it to her. "Stay close, watch our 6, and if you have to shoot, shoot to kill. These people aren't here for negotiations." They moved deeper into the house, Vincent splitting off toward the armory, while Dante led Arya through passages that got progressively narrower and darker. She realized he was navigating by memory, taking routes that wouldn't show up on any blueprint. Secret corridors built by someone who understood that power meant having escape routes no one else knew about. Her father had built similar passages in their old house. Arya had hidden in one the night he died, watching through a crack in the wall as Marcus Way executed him with casual efficiency. The memory tried to drag her under, but she shoved it down viciously. There would be time for trauma later. Right now, she needed to focus. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "Control room. If I can access the security system, I can lock down sections of the house, trap them in kill zones." Dante's voice was barely audible. "Or at least see where they are." They emerged into a basement level Arya hadn't known existed. Concrete walls, industrial lighting, the hum of serious electrical systems. Dante moved to a reinforced door, entering a code that made heavy bolts slide back with pneumatic hisses. The room beyond looked like something from a spy thriller. Wall-to-wall monitors, servers stacked floor to ceiling, enough technology to run a small country's intelligence operation. Dante slid into the main chair, his fingers flying across keyboards with practiced speed. "Systems partially down," he muttered. "They hit us with an EMP, knocked out primary circuits. Backups are kicking in, but there." The monitors flickered to life, showing security feeds from throughout the mansion. What Arya saw made her stomach drop. The attackers weren't just professionals. They were a tactical team operating with military precision, moving through the house in coordinated units. They'd already secured the East Wing and were advancing toward the center, systematically clearing rooms. Dante's security was putting up resistance, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. And in the main foyer, directing the assault with calm gestures, stood Marcus Way. Arya's hand tightened on her weapon. 5 years of grief and rage crystallized into a single burning point of focus. The man who'd killed her father was 30 feet and 3 floors away from her, close enough to touch, close enough to... "Don't even think about it," Dante said without looking away from the screens. "Way's surrounded by 6 heavily armed professionals. You'd be dead before you cleared the stairs." "I don't care." "Yes, you do. Because if you die stupidly, you can't make him pay intelligently." Dante pulled up different camera angles, studying Way's position. "He's exposed, though, confident. That's a weakness we can exploit." "How?" "By giving him what he came for." Dante finally looked at her, and the calculation in his eyes was almost frightening. "He's here for you. So we let him think he's about to get you." Understanding dawned with cold clarity. "You want to use me as bait." "I want to use you as a trap. There's a difference." Dante zoomed in on Way's face. "He doesn't know this house like I do, doesn't know about the control room, the hidden passages, the fact that we can see everything he's doing. We feed him information through a compromised guard, lead him exactly where we want him, and spring the trap. And if it goes wrong, then we die together, and at least you'll get your revenge on the way out." Dante's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I've had worse plans." Arya studied the monitors, her tactical training warring with 5 years of carefully cultivated pacifism. Everything she'd built since her father's death was predicated on the idea that violence only created more violence, that walking away was strength, that survival meant staying invisible. But invisibility had failed. And the man who'd murdered her father was standing in Dante Moretti's foyer like he owned the place, leading an assault that would probably end with both her and Dante dead if they didn't fight back. Sometimes survival meant picking up the gun you'd sworn never to touch again. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Dante's expression shifted to something almost like respect. "Can you act terrified? After the last 48 hours? I don't have to act. He nodded, pulling up a schematic of the house on one monitor. There's a panic room on the second floor, east wing. Old design installed by the previous owner. It's not actually secure. I had it gutted for renovations but left the door in place. Way's team will be looking for something exactly like that. So I hide there. He comes for me, and you set up a very warm welcome in the hallway outside. Dante marked positions on the schematic. Vincent will bring charges from the armory. We wire the corridor, wait for Way and his team to breach the panic room, and then you blow them to hell. Poetically put, but yes. He stood, checking his weapon with automatic efficiency. You'll need to sell it, though. Get there ahead of them. Make some noise. Maybe fire a few shots so they know you're armed but scared. Lead them right into the kill zone. Arya's laugh came out shaky. You're asking me to intentionally draw assassins to my location. You realize how insane that sounds? I'm asking you to trust me. Dante met her eyes. Can you do that? Could she? Trust a man she'd known for less than 2 days, whose world was built on the same violence that had destroyed her family, whose survival depended on skills that mirrored her own. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was suicide, that Dante Moretti had his own agenda, that she was just another piece on a board he was playing. But rationality had gotten her exactly nowhere. Rationality had kept her safe and small and suffocating for 5 years while the people who'd killed her father went unpunished. Maybe it was time to be irrational. I trust you, she said, surprised to find she meant it. Dante nodded once, sharp and decisive. Vincent will get you there through the service corridors. I'll have the charges set within 10 minutes. You hold that room for 15, then get clear when you hear... He paused, thinking, 3 short whistles. That's the signal to run. And if I don't hear it, then I'm dead and you should probably surrender. Chen might keep you alive for information. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, Miss Vale. I'm here to keep us both breathing. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Your father, Michael Rossini. I met him once before the war started. He was smart, ruthless when he needed to be, but fair. He would have been proud of what you've become. The words hit harder than Arya expected. I'm a bartender hiding from her past. You're a survivor who learned when to hide and when to fight. That's wisdom, not cowardice. Dante's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Don't die in my panic room. I'd hate to waste all this effort. Then he was gone, leaving Arya alone with glowing monitors and a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. Vincent returned minutes later, loaded down with enough firepower to outfit a small army. He handed Arya a tactical vest, extra magazines, and a knife that looked like it had seen serious use. Boss filled me in, he said gruffly. You ready for this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Good answer. Vincent led her back into the hidden passages, moving with surprising speed despite his size. They navigated through walls and behind panels, emerging into a second-floor corridor that reeked of smoke and cordite. The panic room was exactly where Dante had indicated, a reinforced door at the end of a hallway lined with expensive artwork, now riddled with bullet holes. Vincent checked the corridor both ways, then gestured her forward. 15 minutes, he said. 3 whistles. Don't be late. Vincent, if this goes wrong, it won't. Boss doesn't fail. He squeezed her shoulder once, surprisingly gentle. Your father trained you for this. Trust that training. Then he disappeared back into the passages, and Arya was alone. She checked the panic room quickly, empty, as Dante had promised, with no actual security features beyond a thick door. Perfect for making someone think they were safe while setting up an ambush outside. Arya positioned herself where she'd be visible through the door's small window, made sure her silhouette would be clear. Then she fired 3 shots into the ceiling, the sound echoing through the corridor like a dinner bell. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving fast but controlled. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment where her father's training either saved her life or got her killed. She adjusted her grip on the weapon, controlled her breathing, waited. Voices in the hallway, speaking Mandarin. Arya's grasp of the language was basic, but she caught enough. Target confirmed. Northeast panic room. She's armed but alone. Marcus Way's voice, calm and collected. Take her alive if possible. Chen wants answers before we end this. Arya's blood turned to ice. She'd expected a quick assault, bullets through the door, professional efficiency. But alive? That meant they'd breach carefully, try to disable rather than kill, give her a window to... The door exploded inward. Flashbang. Arya had turned away at the last second, eyes closed, but the concussion still hit like a truck. Her ears rang, balance wavered. Training kicked in. Stay moving, don't be where they expect you. She rolled left as bullets chewed through the space she'd occupied, came up firing. One attacker went down clutching his leg. Another dove for cover. Arya didn't stay still long enough to confirm kills, just kept moving, kept shooting, made herself as difficult a target as possible in the confined space. Persistent, Wei's voice, closer now. I remember your father had the same quality. It didn't save him either. Rage gave Arya clarity through the disorientation. She fired toward his voice, heard him curse as the round came close. Then hands grabbed her from behind. She hadn't seen the fourth attacker come through the passages, too focused on the frontal assault. Arya drove her elbow back hard, felt cartilage crunch. The grip loosened enough for her to spin, drive her knee up, follow with a strike to the throat. The attacker went down gagging, but now she was exposed, and Wei's remaining men had clear shots. Down! Dante's voice, sharp and commanding from somewhere in the corridor. Arya dropped without thinking. The explosion was apocalyptic. The charges Dante had set tore through the hallway with devastating precision, shaped to direct force away from the panic room and into the killing zone he'd created. Arya felt the shockwave pass over her, heard screaming, smelled burning flesh and electrical fire. Then silence. The terrible ringing silence after violence. Arya forced herself up, ears still screaming, vision blurred. The hallway was a nightmare of smoke and debris and bodies. Wei's tactical team, at least 4 of them, were scattered like broken dolls, their professional efficiency no match for a prepared defensive position. But Wei himself was still moving, crawling toward the stairs, one leg clearly shattered, leaving a trail of blood. His weapon lay meters away, forgotten in his desperate attempt to escape. Arya picked up her gun with hands that shook only slightly, walked toward him with steps that felt divorced from her body, like she was watching herself in a dream or a nightmare. Wei looked up as she approached, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Real, human fear. You're dead, he gasped. Rossini's daughter died with him. Everyone knows that. Everyone was wrong. Arya's voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat, empty. You killed my father, put 2 bullets in his head while I watched. Orders. It was just orders, business, nothing personal. It was personal to me. She raised the weapon, and in that moment she could have pulled the trigger, could have ended the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 5 years, who'd stolen her father and her innocence and any chance at a normal life. Justice, revenge, closure, all available in the simple mechanical action of squeezing metal. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Arya, Dante's voice, quiet but firm. Don't. She didn't lower the gun. Why not? He deserves it. He does, but you don't deserve what it'll cost you. Dante moved into her peripheral vision, careful not to get between her and Wei. I've killed men for revenge. It doesn't bring them back. Doesn't make the grief lighter. Just adds more weight to carry. So what, I let him live? No, I'm just saying you don't have to be the one to pull the trigger. Dante's hand appeared in her line of sight, extended palm up. Give me the gun, Arya. Let me handle this. She should have argued, should have insisted on her right to vengeance after 5 years of running and hiding. But the truth was, Dante was right. Killing Wei wouldn't resurrect her father or undo the trauma. It would just make her a killer, and she'd spent 5 years trying to be anything but what her father's world demanded. Arya lowered the weapon, handed it to Dante. Wei's expression shifted to relief, then confusion, as Dante immediately raised the gun and fired twice. Clean, professional, final. He was already dead, Dante said quietly, looking at the body. You just gave him a few extra seconds to understand why. Arya stared at Wei's corpse, waiting to feel something. Relief, satisfaction, grief. But there was only numbness, the emotional equivalent of white noise after too much stimulus. We need to move, Vincent's voice from down the hallway. He emerged from the smoke, covered in ash and blood that probably wasn't his own. Rest of Chen's team retreated when the charges went off. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they regroup or police arrive. Status of our people? Dante asked. 5 dead, 7 wounded. Could have been worse. Vincent's gaze flicked to Arya. She okay? I don't know. Dante studied her face. Are you? Was she? Arya had just watched the man who killed her father die, had nearly killed him herself, had survived a professional assault through combination of luck and training she'd tried to forget. Her ears still rang from explosions, her hands still trembled with adrenaline, and somewhere under the numbness was an emotional reckoning that would probably destroy her when it finally hit. But she was breathing, standing, alive. I'll let you know when I figure it out, she said. They made their way back through the mansion, past bodies and bullet holes, and the wreckage of what had been a fortress. Dante's security was already moving into cleanup mode, removing the dead, securing entrances, preparing for whatever came next. This was routine for them, Arya realized. Violence, death, rebuilding. The cycle her father had lived and died by. The cycle she'd just stepped back into. Dante led her to what looked like a library, but turned out to be another concealed room. This one was comfortable, though. Leather chairs, a stocked bar, walls lined with books that looked genuinely read. A sanctuary in the middle of chaos. Drink? Dante offered, already pouring amber liquid into crystal glasses. I probably shouldn't. You definitely should. He handed her the glass. We just survived a coordinated assault by one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the city. That warrants good whiskey. Arya took the glass, let the liquor burn down her throat. It helped, a little, gave her something to focus on besides the memory of Wei's face as he died. What happens now? She asked. Now, I respond. Dante's expression had gone cold again, the brief warmth evaporating. Chen sent killers into my home, killed my people, tried to kidnap you. That requires an answer that makes sure no one ever tries this again. You're going after her. I'm going to end her, completely. No half measures, no warnings. She crossed a line tonight that doesn't allow for second chances. He studied Arya over his glass. You should probably leave before that happens. Get out of the city, start over somewhere else. New name, new life. I can arrange it. The offer was practical, even generous. Dante was giving her an exit, a chance to run like she'd been running for 5 years. Disappear into anonymity, let him handle the violent aftermath while she stayed clean. No, Arya said. No? I'm tired of running, tired of hiding from who I was and what that world made me. She set down her glass. Wei's dead, but Chen ordered the hit that killed my father. She deserves the same answer, and I want to be there when it happens. Dante studied her for a long moment. That's not the woman who served drinks and kept her head down talking. That's Michael Rossini's daughter. Maybe I'm both. Maybe I've always been both, and I just spent 5 years pretending otherwise. Arya met his gaze steadily. You said your father would be proud of what I've become. I think mine would be ashamed I ran instead of fighting. Time to change that. Fighting means accepting this world. The violence, the moral compromises, the fact that you'll have blood on your hands that doesn't wash off. Dante's voice carried weight of experience. Once you step fully into this, there's no going back to bartending and anonymity. You sure that's what you want? Was she sure? Arya examined the question from every angle, looking for the exit ramp, the rationalization that would let her walk away clean. But the truth was, Clean had left the building the moment she kissed Dante Moretti to save his life. She'd already chosen sides. Might as well own it. I'm sure, she said. Dante nodded slowly. Then welcome to the war, Miss Vale. Fair warning, it's going to get much worse before it gets better. It usually does. Arya allowed herself a thin smile. But at least I won't be bored. Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Boss, we've got a problem. Police are 10 minutes out, multiple units. Someone called in the explosions. Expected. Start emergency protocols, clean what we can, hide what we can't, prepare legal teams. Dante stood, already moving into crisis mode. And get word to our people on the street. I want Elena Chen's location within the hour. She doesn't get to walk away from this. Already on it. Vincent hesitated. And her? He gestured to Arya, the question clear. Was she an asset or a liability now? Dante looked at her and something shifted in his expression. Not quite trust, but acknowledgement. Recognition of an equal rather than a burden to be protected. She stays with me, he said. Whatever comes next, she's earned the right to see it through. The police arrived in force, securing the mansion and starting their investigation. Dante's lawyers materialized like magic, already building narratives about home invasions and self-defense and the unfortunate necessity of protective measures. Arya gave a statement that was mostly truth, armed attackers, defensive response, multiple casualties. She left out the part about her father, about Wei, about the complicated web of revenge and territory that had actually motivated the assault. The police bought it, or at least pretended to. When you had Dante Moretti's resources and lawyers, a lot of inconvenient questions got answered satisfactorily. By dawn, the mansion had been photographed, documented, and partially cleared. Bodies removed to morgues where they'd be identified and processed. Evidence collected that would eventually support whatever narrative Dante's legal team constructed. The mechanics of making violence look legal, grinding forward with practiced efficiency. Arya watched it all from the library, exhausted but unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Wei's face. Not as he died, but as he'd looked that night 5 years ago. Calm, professional, utterly unmoved as he executed her father. "You should rest," Dante said, appearing beside her with fresh coffee. He changed clothes, his earlier blood-stained shirt replaced with another perfect example of expensive simplicity. Only the shadows under his eyes revealed the night he'd had. Can't. Too wired. Adrenaline crash. It'll hit hard when it comes. He settled into the chair beside hers. Vincent found Chen. She's holed up in a warehouse complex on the north side, heavy security, probably expecting us to come for her. Will you? Eventually, but not today. Today we let her sit and wonder when the hammer's going to fall. Fear's as effective as violence, and it costs less in body bags. Arya sipped her coffee, appreciating the tactical thinking even as part of her wanted immediate action. My father used to say the same thing, that making someone afraid was smarter than making them dead because fear could spread. He wasn't wrong. Dante paused. Can I ask you something personal? You've already asked me everything else. Why did you really save me that night at the bar? You didn't know who I was, didn't know I wasn't involved in your father's death. For all you knew, I could have been the one who ordered it. The question struck at something Arya had been avoiding examining too closely. Why had she acted? Pure instinct, muscle memory, the training her father had drilled into her? Or something else? Something that had recognized in Dante a kindred spirit, another orphan of this brutal world trying to build something lasting from grief? Honestly, I don't know, she said. Maybe because I've seen enough death. Maybe because letting someone die when I could prevent it felt like becoming what I've been running from. Maybe... She looked at him directly. Maybe because you reminded me of my father. The way you carried yourself, that control even in a crowded bar. Like you knew exactly what you were and didn't apologize for it. Dante absorbed this quietly. I'm nothing like your father, Arya. Michael Rossini had limits, lines he wouldn't cross. I don't have that luxury. To hold what I've built, I've had to become something he probably would have hated. Maybe. Or maybe he would have understood that the world changed and you adapted to survive it. She set down her coffee. Either way, I saved you because it was the right thing to do in that moment. Everything that came after, that's just consequence. Consequence, Dante repeated, tasting the word. That's one way to describe this mess. They sat in companionable silence as sunrise painted the library in shades of gold and amber. Outside, the city was waking up, unaware of the violence that had unfolded in this mansion or the war that was about to reshape its criminal landscape. Arya thought about the woman she'd been 48 hours ago, quiet, invisible, carefully constructed to be no one worth noticing. That woman was gone, burned away in gunfire and explosions, and the moment she'd pulled a trigger with intent to kill. What remained was something she couldn't quite define yet. Not the girl who'd hidden while her father died, but not quite the warrior he'd tried to train her to be either. Something in between, still forming, still figuring out how to reconcile 5 years of hiding with the reality that hiding was no longer an option. I need you to teach me, she said suddenly. Dante raised an eyebrow. Teach you what? Everything. How to survive in this world, how to fight properly, how to think like you think. I've got my father's basics, but that's not enough. If I'm really doing this, I need to be more than just competent. I need to be dangerous. You're already dangerous, Arya. You just don't know it yet. Then teach me to know it, to use it. She met his gaze with an intensity that surprised them both. Make me into someone Elena Chen will regret crossing. Dante studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing the request against whatever plans he'd already made. Finally, he nodded. All right, but understand what you're asking. The training will be brutal. You'll learn to hurt people, to kill without hesitation, to make decisions that would horrify the woman who served drinks and minded her own business. There's no going back from that. I already killed the woman who served drinks, Arya said quietly. She died in that panic room. Now I just need to figure out who I'm becoming instead. Then we start tomorrow. Dante stood, offering his hand. Welcome to the family business, Miss Rossini. Your father's daughter finally come home. Arya took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. The name hit her like a physical blow. Rossini, not Veil. The identity she'd buried clawing its way back to claim her. But maybe that was fitting. Maybe you couldn't outrun blood, couldn't deny the legacy written into your DNA, no matter how far you ran. Michael Rossini's daughter was dead. Long live Arya Rossini, whoever she was about to become. Outside the library window, the sun continued its indifferent rise over a city that would soon learn what happened when you came for Dante Moretti's people. Chen had made her move, played her hand, and lost. Now came the reckoning, and Arya would be standing right beside Dante when it arrived, armed with her father's training and her own barely contained fury, ready to write the next chapter of this bloody story in whatever color violence required. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 5 years, Arya felt like she might actually survive to see how it ended. The training started at 5 the next morning. Arya woke to Vincent pounding on her door, his voice cutting through the exhausted fog that still clung to her brain. Jim, now! Boss doesn't wait for anyone. She dragged herself out of bed, every muscle screaming protest from the previous night's violence. Her body had forgotten what real combat felt like, and now it was sending very clear messages about how unhappy it was with recent developments. But pain was just information, her father had always said. You acknowledged it and moved forward anyway. Dante was already in the gym when she arrived, dressed in simple athletic gear that somehow made him look more dangerous than his expensive suits. He didn't acknowledge her entrance, just continued the brutal series of exercises he was working through. Movements that combined martial arts, weight training, and what looked like pure sadism. You're late, he said without breaking rhythm. You didn't tell me what time to be here. 5 means 5, not 5:03. He finished his set, then turned to face her. First lesson. In this world, being 3 minutes late can mean the difference between living and dying. Your father understood that. You will too. Arya bit back a sharp response. She'd asked for this, asked to be trained, to become dangerous. Complaining about the alarm clock wasn't going to convince Dante she was serious. What do you want me to do? She asked. Show me what you remember. Full combat sequence, no holding back. He moved to the center of the mat, taking a ready stance. And understand that I won't be gentle. If you want to survive in this world, you need to know exactly how outmatched you currently are. Pride made Arya want to prove him wrong. 5 years of rust didn't erase a lifetime of training, didn't eliminate muscle memory that had been beaten into her bones. She moved forward, testing his defense with a quick combination her father had taught her. Jab, cross, pivot, kick. Dante blocked everything effortlessly, then swept her legs out from under her so fast she didn't realize she was falling until she hit the mat hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Sloppy, he said, not even breathing hard. You're telegraphing every strike. Again. Arya pushed herself up, ignoring the pain blooming across her back. She attacked again, trying to be less predictable, varying her rhythm. Dante still read her like a children's book, countering with strikes that stopped just short of actually breaking bones, but made it very clear he could if he wanted to. They went 3 rounds before Arya finally stayed down, gasping for air, sweat soaking through her clothes. Dante stood over her, barely winded, and she hated him a little for how easy he'd made it look. Your fundamentals are good, he said, offering a hand to pull her up. But you've been living soft for 5 years and it shows. Your timing's off, your conditioning is terrible, and you rely too much on technique instead of adapting to your opponent. So what's the solution? We rebuild you from the ground up, every morning, 5 a.m., until your body remembers what it was designed to do. And not just physical training. You need to learn how to think like a fighter again, how to read situations, how to survive when everything goes wrong. Over the following weeks, Arya learned exactly how serious Dante was about that promise. The mornings were brutal, hours of sparring, weapons training, tactical exercises that left her bruised and exhausted. But gradually, the rust burned away. Her body remembered, and what it didn't remember, Dante taught her. He was a demanding teacher, accepting nothing less than perfection and pushing her past every limit she thought she had. But he was also fair, never asking her to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and the respect he showed for her growing skills felt earned rather than given. The afternoons were different. Dante brought her into his operations, teaching her the business side of running a criminal empire. She sat in on meetings with lieutenants, learned how territory was managed, how protection rackets worked, how to read people for tells and weaknesses. It was like getting an MBA in organized crime, and Arya absorbed it all with the same intensity she brought to physical training. Vincent became an unexpected ally in all of it. He'd taken to calling her little boss with something that might have been affection and spent hours drilling her on tactical thinking, scenario planning, and the 1,000 small details that kept you alive in their world. Your father was one of the smart ones, Vincent told her one afternoon while teaching her to field strip a rifle. He understood that power wasn't just about who could throw the hardest punch. It was about information, relationships, knowing which battles to fight and which to walk away from. Dante said he had limits my father didn't, Arya said, focusing on the weapon in her hands. Different times. Your father operated when there were still rules, old codes that people respected. Dante operates in a world where those codes got burned down and pissed on. He adapted, or he would have died. Vincent paused. But that doesn't mean your father's way was wrong, just that it doesn't work anymore. Arya thought about that a lot in the quiet moments between training sessions. Her father had been a product of his era, trying to hold on to honor in a dishonorable business. Dante had stripped away the pretense, accepting the brutality of their world and using it as a weapon. Neither approach was right or wrong. They were just different responses to the same fundamental problem of survival, and she was somewhere in the middle, trying to forge her own path from the pieces of both philosophies. 3 weeks into her training, Dante finally brought her into the planning for Elena Chen's ending. They gathered in the war room, Dante, Vincent, 3 lieutenants Arya had come to know, and herself. Maps covered the table, photographs, surveillance reports. Chen's warehouse fortress documented from every angle, guards counted and timed, routines analyzed until they could predict almost everything. She's expecting us to come in loud, Dante said, pointing to the obvious assault routes. Heavy weapons, frontal assault, overwhelming force. That's what I'd normally do, send a message that can't be misunderstood. But, one of the lieutenants prompted, but Chen knows me, knows my style. She's fortified against exactly that approach, so we're going to do something she won't expect. Dante looked at Arya. We're going to walk in the front door and ask nicely. Arya blinked. You're joking. I never joke about strategy. Dante's smile was sharp. Chen thinks she's in a defensive position, that she can wait us out or negotiate from strength. We shatter that illusion by showing her she was never safe to begin with. You and I, alone, walk right through her security and sit down for tea. That's insane, Vincent said flatly. She'll kill you both the moment you're in range. She'll try. But here's what she doesn't know. Dante pulled up a new set of documents. 3 of her inner circle have been on my payroll for 6 months, her head of security, her logistics coordinator, and her second in command. They'll ensure our safety right up until the moment we don't need it anymore. The elegance of it hit Arya like cold water. Dante hadn't been sitting idle while Chen planned her assault. He'd been infiltrating her organization, planting seeds that were only now bearing fruit. By the time they walked through that door, Chen would already be surrounded by people who answered to Dante. And me? Arya asked. What's my role in this? You're my insurance. Chen knows who you are now, knows you're Michael Rossini's daughter. Your presence makes this personal for her, makes her think there's room for negotiation or leverage. Dante's expression was cold as winter. She'll focus on you while missing the real threat until it's too late. So I'm bait again. You're a chess piece playing multiple roles, bait, distraction, and if everything goes wrong, he slid a weapon across the table toward her. You're the one who puts a bullet in Chen's head while I handle her guards. Arya picked up the gun, checked it automatically. Compact 9mm, well-maintained, the kind of weapon you could conceal easily, but that carried enough stopping power to end a threat. She'd fired hundreds of rounds through similar models during her training, knew its weight and balance like an extension of her own hand. When? She asked. Tomorrow night. Chen's having a meeting with her remaining allies, trying to shore up support. She'll be distracted, confident in her fortress. Perfect time to prove she was wrong about everything. The lieutenants had questions, backup plans, extraction routes, contingencies if the turned guards failed to perform. Dante answered them all with the calm certainty of someone who'd war-gamed every scenario a dozen times. This wasn't improvisation. It was a surgical strike wrapped in the appearance of reckless bravado. After the meeting broke up, Arya found herself alone with Dante in the war room, staring at Chen's photograph pinned to the tactical board. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. "To watch you kill the woman who ordered my father's death? I've been ready for 5 years." "That's not what I asked." Dante turned to face her. "Watching is different from participating. Once you walk into that warehouse with me, once you draw that weapon with intent to use it, you cross a line that doesn't have a way back. You become what you've been running from." Arya met his gaze steadily. "I became that the night I survived your panic room." "This is just me accepting what I already am." "And what's that?" "My father's daughter, your partner, someone who understands that some debts can only be paid in blood." She touched the weapon at her hip. "I'm ready, Dante. Stop asking if I'm sure and start trusting that I know my own mind." Something shifted in his expression, respect mixed with something darker, something that looked almost like regret. "Your father would be proud. I'm not sure that's a good thing." "Neither am I, but it's the truth either way." They stood in the war room as evening descended into night, two orphans of violence preparing to visit more of it on someone who'd earned their wrath. Tomorrow would bring ending or escalation, and either way, nothing would be the same after. Arya spent that night cleaning her weapons, checking her gear, running through scenarios until her mind could map every possibility. Sleep felt impossible with adrenaline already starting to build, so she didn't fight it. Just prepared and waited for dawn. When morning came, Dante was already in the gym despite having stayed up as late as she had, working through forms with perfect discipline. Arya joined him silently, and they moved through routines side by side, two warriors preparing for battle in the only way that made sense. "Vincent thinks I'm making a mistake bringing you," Dante said during a water break. "What do you think?" "I think you've earned the right to see this through, and I think having you there sends exactly the message I want. That the Rossini line didn't end with your father, and that Chen's mistake was thinking she could erase that legacy." The words settled over Arya like armor. She wasn't just going as Dante's backup or insurance. She was going as a statement, as living proof that some families didn't die quietly. They spent the day in final preparations. Dante met with his compromised members of Chen's organization, confirming their positions and commitment. Arya ran through weapons drills with Vincent until her draw was smooth as silk, until she could put 3 rounds center mass in under 2 seconds, everything polished to a lethal edge. As sunset painted the city in shades of blood and gold, Dante and Arya dressed for their meeting. He wore one of his perfect suits, expensive and understated, the image of civilized power. She chose simple black, pants, shirt, jacket that concealed her weapon while allowing easy access. They looked like they were heading to dinner, not an execution. Vincent drove them to the warehouse district, his jaw tight with disapproval he didn't voice. He'd learned that when Dante made a decision, arguing was pointless. You just made sure the backup plan was solid and hoped for the best. "Extraction point is 2 blocks north," Vincent said as they approached Chen's fortress. "You don't come out in 30 minutes. I'm coming in with everyone." "We'll be out in 20, Dante said calmly. "Chen doesn't get to waste our evening." The warehouse loomed ahead, a converted industrial building that had been transformed into something almost palatial, guards visible on the roof, at the entrance, patrolling the perimeter. The kind of security that looked intimidating until you realized half of them were already bought and paid for. Dante and Arya walked up to the main entrance like they owned it. The guards tensed, weapons rising, then paused as recognition set in. These were the ones on Dante's payroll, Arya realized, playing their parts perfectly. "Mr. Moretti," one of them said, speaking into a radio, "Ms. Chen wasn't expecting you." "I don't generally ask permission to visit people who tried to kill me." Dante's smile was all teeth. "Tell her I brought a gift she'll want to see." He gestured to Arya, and she saw a calculation flicker across the guard's face. Michael Rossini's daughter, delivered right to Chen's door. Too valuable to turn away, too dangerous to leave unattended. They were escorted inside through halls decorated with art that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Chen had built herself a palace inside this fortress, and every detail screamed wealth and taste and power. It would have been impressive if Arya didn't know it was all about to come crashing down. The conference room at the center of the building was expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table that could seat 20, and currently hosting Elena Chen and 4 of her remaining allies. They looked up as Dante and Arya entered, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Chen herself was smaller than Arya expected, mid-40s with steel-gray hair and eyes like chips of obsidian. She studied them with the cold assessment of a scientist examining particularly interesting bacteria. "Dante Moretti," she said, her voice carrying a hint of accent that 5 decades in America hadn't quite erased. "You have impressive nerve walking into my home uninvited. Your home tried to kill me and mine first. I thought we should discuss that face to face." Dante settled into a chair without being invited, radiating casual confidence. "And I brought a peace offering." His hand gestured to Arya, and Chen's eyes narrowed. "Michael Rossini's daughter. I heard rumors you'd taken her in." Chen's smile was cold. "How sentimental of you, protecting your predecessor's child." "Not protection, partnership." Dante leaned back. "Arya, say hello to the woman who ordered your father's execution." The room went very quiet. Chen's allies shifted uncomfortably, hands moving toward weapons. But Chen herself just stared at Arya with renewed interest. "So it's true. The little girl who disappeared is all grown up and playing in the family business." Chen tilted her head. "Does she know what her father really was? The deals he made? The people he betrayed?" "I know enough," Arya said, her voice steady despite rage burning in her chest. "I know you saw him as an obstacle and had him removed. I know Marcus Wei pulled the trigger on your orders." "Wei's dead," Chen said. "Dante killed him, I assume? How convenient for both of you." "Actually, I nearly killed him myself. Dante just finished what I started." Arya moved further into the room, ignoring the guards tracking her movements. "But you're the one who gave the order. That makes you the one who really matters." Chen laughed, genuine amusement in the sound. "Is this a revenge play? You came here to kill me for sins 5 years old? How predictable." "No," Dante said quietly. "We came here to give you a choice." "A choice?" Chen's amusement faded. "You walk into my fortress, surrounded by my people, and think you're in a position to offer choices? Your head of security, Marcus Chen, no relation, has been on my payroll for 6 months. Dante's voice remained conversational. "Your logistics coordinator, Sarah Park? Also mine. Your second in command, Thomas Liu? He's standing right behind you, and he's been feeding me information since before you planned your assault on my home." Chen spun, looking at Liu, who met her gaze without flinching. The betrayal in her eyes was almost beautiful. "You're lying," she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Test it. Give an order, any order. See how many of your people actually follow it." Dante stood, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "Here's your choice, Elena. You walk away. Retire. Leave the city with enough money to live comfortably somewhere I'll never have to think about you again. Or you end up like my father," Arya finished. "Executed in your own fortress by people you thought you could trust." Chen looked between them, and Arya could see her mind working through the math. How many of her people had Dante turned? How deep did the betrayal run? Could she fight her way out, or was she already surrounded by enemies? "This is impossible," Chen said, but the words came out weak. "My people are loyal." "Your people are pragmatic," Dante corrected. "They understand that you ordered a failed hit on me, that you lost Marcus Way, that your position has been eroding for months. I offered them security and better pay. They took the sensible option." Liu stepped forward, confirming what they all already knew. "I'm sorry, Ms. Chen, but Mr. Moretti made it clear that supporting you was a death sentence. I have a family to think about." The other guards in the room, the ones who weren't on Dante's payroll, were looking at each other nervously now, realizing they were outnumbered by traitors. Chen's allies at the table had gone pale, understanding that this meeting was an execution they'd accidentally attended. Chen's hand moved toward a weapon at her hip. Arya's gun was out and aimed before Chen's fingers touched metal. "I wouldn't." They froze in a tableau of violence suspended. Arya with her weapon trained on Chen's center mass, Chen's hand hovering over her gun, everyone else caught between fight and flight. "Here's how this ends," Dante said into the silence. "You accept my offer and leave. Tonight. Forever. Or Arya puts 3 rounds in you and I walk out of here having solved my Chen problem permanently. Your choice, but choose fast. We have dinner reservations." Chen stared at Arya, and something passed between them. Recognition of shared circumstances, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement that they were both players in a game that rarely ended well for anyone. "If I leave," Chen said carefully, "what guarantees do I have that you won't hunt me down later?" "You have my word, which is worth more than any contract in this business." Dante's expression was granite. "But if you ever come back, if you ever threaten what's mine again, I won't offer choices. I'll just end you." Chen looked at her assembled allies, at the guards who'd betrayed her, at the empire she'd built crumbling in real time. Then she looked at Arya, at Michael Rossini's daughter standing there with a weapon and the will to use it, living proof that some legacies didn't die quietly. "I'll need 24 hours to arrange transportation," Chen said finally. "You have 12. After that, I assume you chose option 2. Dante moved toward the door, Arya matching his movement while keeping Chen in her sight line. "And Elena? Thank you for the valuable lesson in why you should never underestimate me." They walked out the same way they'd entered, calmly, confidently, like they'd just concluded a pleasant business meeting instead of dismantling someone's entire criminal empire. The guards who'd escorted them in now escorted them out. Their allegiance clearly shifted. Vincent was waiting at the extraction point, engine running, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. "Jesus Christ, boss, you actually pulled it off." "Doubt is so unattractive in you, Vincent." Dante slid into the car, Arya following. "Home. And someone bring champagne. We're celebrating." As they drove away from Chen's fortress, former fortress now, Arya felt the adrenaline starting to crash. She'd just stared down the woman who'd ordered her father's death, had been seconds from pulling a trigger that would have ended it all. And instead, Dante had given Chen mercy wrapped in humiliation. "Why didn't we kill her?" Arya asked quietly. "Because killing her would have created a power vacuum that would take months to resolve and cost dozens of lives." Dante looked at her seriously. "And because letting her live with the knowledge that she lost everything without firing a shot is crueler than death. She'll spend the rest of her life knowing she was beaten by better planning and turned allies." "My father wouldn't have let her walk." "Your father operated differently. Honor killings, blood debts paid in blood. It worked for him." Dante paused. "But I found that sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to an enemy is let them survive their defeat. Chen will live, but she'll never be anyone again. That's justice of a different kind." Arya considered this, turning it over in her mind. She'd wanted Chen dead, wanted the clean closure of revenge. But maybe Dante was right. Maybe there was a kind of poetry in Chen living with her failure, stripped of power and position, just another exile trying to survive in a world that had moved on without her. "Does it always feel like this?" she asked. "After? Empty? Anticlimactic? Like you climbed a mountain just to find out there's another mountain behind it?" Dante's smile was tired. "Yes, every time. Victory in our world is never as satisfying as you think it'll be." They rode the rest of the way in silence, the city lights blurring past, both of them processing what they'd accomplished and what it cost. Chen was finished, the threat eliminated, the empire secured. Mission accomplished. So why did Arya feel like she'd lost something instead of won? Back at the mansion, the celebration was muted despite Vincent's best efforts. The staff had prepared food and brought out expensive wine, but the mood was reflective rather than triumphant. People who'd lived through Chen's assault and the brutal weeks after didn't feel much like partying. They felt like survivors, which was a different emotion entirely. Arya found herself on the terrace overlooking the gardens, wine glass in hand, watching the moon rise over the city her father had once helped rule. She'd done what she set out to do, faced her demons, confronted her father's killer, stood her ground in a world that had taken everything from her. So why did it feel hollow? Second-guessing yourself? Dante appeared beside her, his own glass matching hers. Trying to figure out what I feel. It's not regret exactly. More like realization that revenge doesn't fix anything? Dante sipped his wine. That's the hardest lesson. We build up these moments in our heads, imagine they'll change everything. Then they happen, and we're still the same broken people, just with one less thing to chase. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. Just to tell you the truth. He set down his glass, turning to face her fully. You were good today. Calm under pressure, read the room perfectly, knew when to speak and when to let me handle it. Your father would have been proud. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm starting to wonder if it's true or if you're all just being kind. I'm never kind, just accurate. Dante paused, weighing words carefully. You know you don't have to stay, right? Chen's gone. Wei's dead. Your father's enemies are dust. You could walk away now, start over for real. New city, new name, a life that doesn't involve guns and tactical planning. The offer was genuine, Arya could tell. Dante was giving her the exit she'd claimed to want a month ago, the freedom to be someone other than Michael Rossini's daughter or Dante Moretti's partner in violence. Is that what you want? She asked. For me to leave? I want you to have the choice I never did. My father died and left me an empire that would have collapsed if I'd walked away. You don't have that anchor. You can be free if you want it. Arya thought about freedom, what it actually meant. A month ago, it had meant invisibility, safety, the absence of violence. But she'd learned that absence wasn't the same as peace. You could hide from the world and still wake up every morning carrying grief like stones in your pockets. What if freedom isn't what I want anymore? She said quietly. What if I want purpose instead? Dante's expression shifted to something she couldn't quite read. Purpose in this world means accepting things most people couldn't live with. I already accepted them. Tonight proved that. Arya met his gaze directly. I'm not leaving, Dante. I'm staying. I'm building something here, and I'm going to make sure my father's legacy doesn't end in a closet where a scared girl watched him die. Does that answer your question? For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then slowly, deliberately, he smiled. Not the cold, calculated expression he wore for business, but something genuine and almost warm. Yes, he said simply, it does. They stood on the terrace as night deepened around them. Two people who'd found in each other something they didn't know they'd been looking for. Not romance. That was too simple, too clean for what was growing between them, but recognition, understanding, the rare comfort of being seen completely and accepted anyway. Arya had walked into Dante's world to save his life and ended up saving her own instead. Not from danger or violence, but from the slow death of hiding from who she really was. And now, standing beside him with the city spread out below like a promise and a threat, she finally felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The past was buried. Her father could rest. And tomorrow, Arya Rossini would start building something new from the ashes of everything that had burned. 3 months after Elena Chen disappeared into whatever exile Dante had arranged, the city settled into a new equilibrium. Territory that had been contested for years found clear ownership. Protection rackets ran smoothly under centralized management. The violence that had simmered beneath the surface for so long cooled to occasional sparks, rather than open warfare. And Arya found herself at the center of it all, no longer hiding, but stepping fully into the role she'd been running from her entire adult life. The transition hadn't been seamless. There were still people in Dante's organization who saw her as an outsider, a Rossini trying to reclaim power through the back door. But Arya had learned from watching Dante that respect in their world wasn't given. It was earned through demonstration of competence and the willingness to make hard choices. She'd proven both repeatedly. The morning started like most others now, training with Dante at 5, breakfast while reviewing overnight reports, then meetings with various lieutenants about operations across the city. Arya had taken over management of the Eastern Territories, the same areas her father had once controlled, and she was methodically rebuilding the infrastructure that had crumbled after his death. "The Valenti family is making noise again," Vincent reported during the morning briefing. "Nothing aggressive yet, but Marco's been holding private meetings with some of the old guard. Could be planning something." Dante looked at Arya. "Your call. Eastern approaches are your jurisdiction." The fact that he was asking rather than dictating still felt strange sometimes, but that was how their partnership had evolved. Dante handled strategy and the northern operations, Arya managed the east, and they collaborated on everything that affected the whole. Equal partners in an empire built on violence and careful negotiation. "Set up a meeting," Arya said. "I'll talk to Marco personally. He's old family, old codes. He'll respond better to direct conversation than threats." "You sure?" Vincent's skepticism was clear. "Valenti's been making trouble since before you were born, which is exactly why sending Dante would escalate. But me?" Arya smiled coldly. "I'm Michael Rossini's daughter, reaching out for dialogue. That appeals to his sense of how things should be done. And if dialogue fails, then we consider other options." Dante nodded approval. "Set it up for tonight. Neutral ground, minimal security. Make it feel like diplomacy, not intimidation." The meeting was arranged for a restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of old-world establishment where deals had been made for generations. Arya arrived alone except for Vincent shadowing her from a discreet distance, a show of trust that would either be reciprocated or exploited. Marco Valenti was waiting in a private room, looking every inch the old guard crime boss. Silver hair, expensive suit slightly dated and cut, the bearing of someone who remembered when their world had different rules. He stood when Arya entered, old-fashioned courtesy that almost made her smile. "Miss Rossini," he said, the name carrying weight. "You look remarkably like your father. It's unsettling." "I've been told." Arya settled into the seat across from him. "Thank you for meeting with me." Curiosity more than courtesy, I'll admit. The Rossini girl who disappeared returns as Dante Moretti's partner. It's quite the story. It's quite the life. Arya studied him openly. "I hear you've been restless lately. Meetings with people who might share your concerns about the current arrangement." Marco had the grace not to deny it. "The city has changed. Not all of us are comfortable with how quickly the old ways have been abandoned." "The old ways got my father killed," Arya said bluntly. "Honor and codes and respect for tradition didn't stop someone from putting 2 bullets in his head. So forgive me if I'm not sentimental about preserving a system that failed everyone it was supposed to protect. Your father was a good man operating in difficult times. My father was a complex man who taught me to survive when the rules broke down. And they have broken down, Marco. You know it as well as I do." Arya leaned forward. "So the question is whether you're planning to make that everyone's problem, or if we can find a way to work together." Marco sipped his wine, buying time to think. What would working together look like? "You keep your operations as they are. I don't interfere with how you run things as long as you don't interfere with Eastern Territories. We coordinate on anything that affects both our interests, and we present a unified front to anyone thinking about causing trouble. And if I refuse? Then you're choosing conflict with someone who has more resources, better intelligence, and nothing left to lose." Arya's voice remained pleasant, but the steel beneath was unmistakable. "I don't want that, Marco. I'd rather have you as an ally than an enemy, but I won't let nostalgia for old codes destabilize what we've built." Marco studied her for a long moment, and Arya could see him weighing options. He was old enough to remember her father, smart enough to know that Dante's consolidation had brought stability, but proud enough that bending the knee to someone Arya's age probably stung. "Your father and I disagreed on many things," Marco said finally, "but he understood that this business requires certain courtesies. Respect for those who came before. I'm not sure Dante Moretti understands that. Dante understands power and how to keep it, but he also understands that crushing everyone who questions him creates enemies faster than allies." Arya paused. I'm the bridge, Marco, between old ways and new, between Dante's efficiency and my father's diplomacy. Work with me, and you get the best of both. The calculation played out across Marco's face. Pride versus pragmatism, tradition versus survival. Finally, he extended his hand across the table. Your father would be proud of the woman you've become, he said, even if he'd hate the world that shaped you. We have an understanding, Miss Rossini. I won't cause trouble for your operations. Arya shook his hand, sealing an accord that would prevent weeks of potential conflict. Thank you. That means more than you know. She left the restaurant feeling the weight of her father's legacy settling more comfortably on her shoulders. She was making her own path now, using his lessons but not bound by his limitations. It felt right in a way nothing had for 5 years. Vincent fell into step beside her as she reached the car. Well? Valenti's on board, crisis averted. Boss is going to be impressed. Most people would have needed threats and shows of force. Most people aren't Michael Rossini's daughter learning from Dante Moretti. Arya slid into the car. Home. I need to update Dante before the evening meetings. But when she arrived back at the mansion, she found Dante in his study looking uncharacteristically unsettled. Documents covered his desk, and his jaw was tight with tension that immediately set Arya's instincts screaming. What's wrong? She asked, closing the door behind her. Elena Chen is dead. The words landed like a physical blow. Arya moved to the desk, looking at the reports. Chen had been found in a hotel in Singapore, apparent suicide. Single gunshot wound to the head, no signs of struggle. A note that blamed depression and financial ruin. You don't believe it was suicide, Arya said, reading Dante's expression. Chen was many things, but she wasn't someone who'd take the easy way out. She'd rebuild, plot revenge, spend decades if necessary trying to reclaim what she lost. Dante's fingers drummed against the desk. This was an execution made to look like suicide. The question is, who ordered it? Arya's mind raced through possibilities. Her former allies? Someone who thought she knew too much? Or someone sending me a message? Dante pulled up another file. Chen's second-in-command, Thomas Liu, the one who turned for us, also died this week. Car accident in Hong Kong. And Sarah Park, the logistics coordinator, heart attack at 38 with no prior health issues. The pattern was clear and chilling. Everyone who'd betrayed Chen was being systematically eliminated, made to look like natural causes or accidents. Someone was cleaning house, removing loose ends. They're coming after everyone who worked with you, Arya said quietly. Not just worked with me, betrayed someone to work with me. Dante's expression was grim. This is about sending a message to my organization. Betray me and you might survive temporarily, but eventually you'll pay for it. Who has the resources and motivation to pull this off? That's the question keeping me up at night. Dante stood, moving to the window. Chen's dead, Valenti's old guard, but not that coordinated. Greco's a thug without this kind of sophistication, which means either there's a player we don't know about, or someone inside your organization is making a move, Arya finished. The implications were terrifying. If someone within Dante's trusted circle was orchestrating this, it meant the intelligence network they'd relied on was compromised. It meant every decision they'd made for months might have been influenced by someone playing a longer game. We need to lock this down, Dante said, quietly. If there's a traitor, showing our hand will just drive them deeper underground. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked in careful secrecy. Arya and Dante reviewed every operation, every decision, looking for patterns of information that shouldn't have leaked. Vincent ran discreet background checks on the inner circle, searching for financial irregularities or suspicious contacts. The answer, when it came, was from an unexpected source. Teresa, the woman who managed Dante's household, had been with him for 15 years, utterly reliable, completely trusted, so integrated into the background that people forgot she was there, which made her the perfect intelligence asset if you could turn her. The evidence was subtle. Encrypted messages buried in household supply orders, money transferred through her sister's accounts, meetings disguised as shopping trips. But once Arya started looking, the pattern was clear. Teresa had been feeding information to someone outside the organization for at least 6 months. I'll handle it, Dante said, his voice like ice, when Arya brought him the evidence. No, let me. Arya met his gaze steadily. This is someone who was in your home, who you trusted. It should be personal, not business. Dante studied her face, understanding what she was really asking. This wasn't just about confronting a traitor. It was about Arya proving she could handle the darkest parts of their world without flinching. "All right," he said finally, "but I'm there if you need backup." They found Teresa in the kitchen late that night, preparing breakfast ingredients for the next morning with the same efficient movements she'd performed for years. She looked up as they entered, and something flickered across her face, recognition that this moment had been coming. "How long have you known?" Teresa asked quietly. "2 days. I wanted to be sure before we had this conversation." Arya pulled out a chair, sitting across from the woman who'd welcomed her into this house months ago. "The question is why? You've been with Dante for 15 years. What changed?" Teresa set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. Her hands trembled slightly, the first sign of fear Arya had ever seen from her. "My daughter," Teresa said. "She has a rare genetic disorder, needs treatment that costs $200,000 a year. I've been managing, barely, but 6 months ago her condition got worse. The experimental treatments she needs," her voice cracked. "I couldn't afford them. And someone approached me with an offer." "Who?" Dante's voice was flat. "I never met them directly. Everything was through intermediaries, encrypted messages, dead drops. But they knew everything about my daughter, about her condition, about how desperate I was." Teresa looked at Dante with tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to betray you, but she's my daughter." Arya felt something twist in her chest. This was the part of their world that never made it into the simplified narratives of crime and punishment. The impossible choices. The people caught between loyalty and love. The way circumstances could turn anyone into a traitor. "What did you tell them?" she asked. "Everything. Security schedules, who you met with, what you were planning. I'm the one who told them about Arya being Michael Rossini's daughter." Teresa's voice broke completely. "I'm the reason Chen knew to target both of you. I'm the reason people died." Dante moved behind Teresa's chair, and for a moment Arya thought he was going to kill her right there in the kitchen. But he just stood, hands resting on the back of her chair, his expression unreadable. "Your daughter's name is Sophia, right?" he said quietly. "Age 12, lives with your sister in Vermont?" Teresa nodded, confused. "Vincent," Dante called, and the big man appeared in the doorway like he'd been waiting. "Get me Sophia's medical records and the contact information for her treatment team, all of it, within the hour." "Boss," Teresa started. "Be quiet." Dante's voice cut like a blade. "You betrayed me. Got my people killed. Compromised operations that took years to build. Under normal circumstances, you'd be dead already, and your daughter would spend the rest of her life wondering why her mother disappeared." Teresa went pale as bone. "But," Dante continued, "I understand impossible choices. I understand what it means to sacrifice anything for family." He moved around to face her. "So here's what's going to happen. Vincent is going to arrange the best possible care for Sophia. Experimental treatments, top specialists, everything she needs. Fully funded. No strings attached." Teresa stared at him like he'd started speaking a language she didn't understand. "What?" "In exchange, you're going to feed your handlers exactly what I tell you to feed them. Become my asset inside their intelligence network. Help me find out who's been orchestrating this, and when I've got what I need, you and Sophia will disappear. New identities, new city, enough money to never have to make these kinds of choices again." "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why would you help me after what I did?" "Because destroying you destroys your daughter, and she's innocent in all this." Dante's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And because Arya's right. Sometimes mercy is more powerful than vengeance." Arya felt something shift in her chest, seeing this side of Dante she'd suspected existed but hadn't fully witnessed before. He wasn't just a crime lord ruling through fear. He was someone who understood the complicated mathematics of loyalty, family, and impossible choices. Teresa worked with them over the following weeks, feeding carefully crafted misinformation to her handlers, while Dante's people traced the communication chain. The trail led through multiple layers of cutouts and intermediaries, but eventually they found the source. Antonio Greco, the Northside boss who everyone had dismissed as a thug without sophistication. Except he'd been playing a much longer game than anyone realized, using his reputation as muscle to hide the fact that he was methodically undermining Dante's organization from within. He's been planning this for over a year, Vincent reported, laying out the intelligence they'd gathered. Started recruiting assets before Chen even made her move. The attack on the mansion, Chen's elimination. He's been orchestrating everything, waiting for the right moment to step in and fill the power vacuum. Ambitious, Dante said, almost admiringly. I underestimated him. We all did. Arya studied Greco's file. The question is how we respond. He's got deep enough roots now that removing him will be complicated. Not if we do it right. Dante pulled up a map of the city, marking territories. Greco's strength is in his network, the people he's turned. But those people are mercenaries, loyal to whoever pays best and protects them most effectively. We demonstrate that Greco can't protect them. His empire collapses. They spent 3 days planning, coordinating with the few members of Greco's organization who'd stayed loyal to Dante or could be convinced to switch sides. Then they struck. It wasn't loud or violent. Instead, it was surgical. Simultaneous raids on Greco's operations, assets frozen, supply chains disrupted, key lieutenants arrested on charges that Dante's people in the police department had been sitting on for months. Within 24 hours, Greco's infrastructure was in shambles. But the man himself remained untouched, watching his empire crumble from his fortified compound in the industrial district. Dante could have sent people to kill him, could have ended it with bullets and fire. Instead, he did something crueler. He invited Greco to negotiate. They met in the same restaurant where Arya had negotiated with Valenti, neutral ground with the pretense of diplomacy. Greco arrived with heavy security, clearly expecting violence despite the peaceful venue. He looked older than his file photos, stress and paranoia aging him prematurely. Dante and Arya were already seated when he arrived, the image of calm confidence. Antonio, Dante greeted him pleasantly. Thank you for coming. Cut the shit, Moretti. What do you want? Greco's voice carried the rough edges of someone who'd clawed his way up from nothing. I want you to understand your situation clearly before we discuss next steps. Dante slid a folder across the table. Your operations are finished. Your people have either been arrested or switched sides. Your assets are frozen. You have, by my estimate, maybe a week before your remaining crew realizes you can't pay them and they scatter. Greco didn't open the folder, but his jaw tightened. So you're here to gloat? I'm here to offer you the same choice I gave Elena Chen. Walk away. Leave the city. I'll unfreeze enough of your assets that you can live comfortably somewhere else. In exchange, you never come back, never make another move against me or mine. And if I refuse, then I stop being merciful and start being thorough. Your organization doesn't just collapse, it gets absorbed. Your people don't just leave, they turn on you for the bounty I'll put on your head. You don't just lose, you get erased. Dante's voice remained pleasant, but the threat was absolute. I'm giving you dignity and defeat, Antonio. Take it. Greco looked between them, and Arya could see him calculating odds that didn't favor him any way he played it. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. How long do I have to get out? 72 hours. After that, the offer expires and we do this the hard way. Greco stood, the weight of his loss visible in every movement. Your father would be ashamed of you, Moretti. All this, it's not how things used to be done. My father's dead, killed by people who did things the old way. Dante's expression didn't change. I learned from that, adapted, survived. That's why I'm here making offers, and you're the one packing your bags. After Greco left, Arya and Dante sat in silence for a moment, processing another threat eliminated through strategy rather than bloodshed. Do you think he'll actually leave? Arya asked. Yes, because he's smart enough to know I wasn't bluffing about the alternative. Dante signaled for wine. And because unlike Chen, he actually wants to live more than he wants revenge. 3 major threats in 4 months. We're either very good or very lucky. Probably both. Dante studied her across the table. You've changed. From the woman who jumped over a bar to save my life to someone who helps dismantle criminal empires without blinking. Your father really would be proud. Maybe. Or maybe he'd be horrified that his daughter became exactly what he tried to protect me from. Arya swirled wine in her glass. But I think he'd understand that this world doesn't give you clean choices, only ones you can live with. Over the following weeks, the city settled into its new reality. Greco disappeared to somewhere in South America, last they heard. Teresa and her daughter relocated to Portland with new identities and enough money to never worry again. The gaps in Dante's organization were filled with people who'd proven their loyalty through the recent chaos. And Arya found herself, for the first time in 5 years, with space to breathe. No immediate threats. No assassins hunting her. No need to wake up every morning wondering if today was the day her past caught up with her. It was terrifying. "You're restless," Dante observed one evening. They'd fallen into a routine of sharing dinner, discussing the day's business, existing in a partnership that had become the most stable thing in either of their lives. "I'm adjusting. For 5 years, survival meant staying invisible. Then survival meant fighting constantly. Now it means, what? Managing territories and attending meetings? It feels wrong. Peaceful feels wrong because you're not used to it." Dante refilled her wine. "But peace is the whole point of what we've been doing. Building something stable enough that we're not constantly putting out fires. Is this what you wanted when you took over after your father died?" The question seemed to surprise him. Dante was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I wanted to survive, to prove I could hold what he'd built without it crumbling." He paused. "But somewhere along the way, it became about more than that. Building something that might actually last, that might be more than just violence and territory. You think that's possible in our world?" "I think you and I are proof it might be. We're both orphans of this business, both shaped by violence we didn't choose. But we're also trying to build something different from what our fathers had. Maybe that counts for something." Arya thought about the girl she'd been, scared, hiding, running from a legacy she didn't want. And the woman she'd become, dangerous, competent, choosing to stand her ground rather than flee. The transformation felt both inevitable and impossible, like she'd been walking toward this version of herself for years without realizing it. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Dante looked at her with those dark eyes that missed nothing. "I'm listening." "That first night, when I kissed you to save your life, I told you it was pure instinct, muscle memory, training taking over." Arya met his gaze steadily. "That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." "What's the whole truth?" "The whole truth is that some part of me recognized you, not consciously but deeper than that, recognized someone else carrying the same weight, fighting the same battles, trying to survive in a world that wants to destroy anyone who shows weakness." She paused, gathering courage. "And some part of me wanted to save you, because I saw in you the possibility of not being alone in all this." Dante was very still, processing what she'd just admitted. Then slowly, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I should probably tell you that I've been falling in love with you," he said, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept locked away. "Since somewhere around the time you faced down Way without flinching, maybe earlier. I'm not good at tracking these things." Arya's breath caught. She'd been so focused on survival, on proving herself, on building her place in this world, that she hadn't let herself acknowledge what had been growing between them. But now, with his hand warm in hers and truth hanging in the air like a promise, she couldn't deny it anymore. "I should probably tell you the same thing," she said, "and that it terrifies me more than assassins or territory wars or any of the violence we've survived. Because love is a weakness in our world? Because love is a vulnerability. And we've both been hurt enough to know what happens when people find your vulnerabilities." Dante stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair, the powerful crime lord who ruled the city on his knees in front of someone he'd chosen to love. "Then we protect each other," he said simply. "Make our vulnerability into strength because there are two of us instead of one. Build something together that's stronger than what either of us could build alone." Arya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the dangerous man who'd trapped her in his mansion, but the partner who'd trained beside her, fought alongside her, trusted her with pieces of himself he showed to no one else. Someone as broken and rebuilt as she was, choosing to be vulnerable despite every lesson their world had taught them. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, let's build something." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like that first desperate kiss in the bar. This was slow, intentional, full of promise and possibility and the terrifying hope that maybe two people could find something good even in the darkest places. 6 months later, Arya stood in front of a mirror in a private room, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen for today. No elaborate ceremony, no hundreds of guests, just a small gathering of people who mattered, binding her life to Dante's in the most permanent way their world allowed. Teresa, who'd returned briefly from her new life to help prepare, made final adjustments to Arya's hair, tears streaming down her face. "Your father would have loved to see this," Teresa said quietly. "Maybe. He probably would have had opinions about who I'm marrying." Arya smiled at her reflection. "But I think he'd understand that Dante and I found something rare, that we're choosing each other despite everything that should make this impossible." Vincent appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in formal attire. "Boss is ready when you are, and he looks nervous, which I've never seen before. It's unsettling." Arya laughed, some of her own nervousness easing. "Tell him I'll be there in 2 minutes. And Vincent, thank you for everything." "Just doing my job." But the scarred man's expression softened. "Though, for the record, I'm glad you stayed. You're good for him. Good for all of us." The ceremony was held in the mansion's gardens, under an autumn sky that painted everything in shades of gold and amber. Marco Valenti attended, representing the old guard's blessing. Former enemies turned allies filled seats alongside Dante's most trusted people. And at the front, Dante waited, looking at Arya like she was the answer to questions he'd been asking his entire life. They spoke vows that were simple but meaningful, promises to stand together, to protect what they'd built, to face whatever came next as partners in every sense of the word. Arya slid a ring onto Dante's finger, and he did the same for her, the metal a physical reminder of promises that went deeper than words. When they kissed, sealing the commitment they'd already been living for months, Arya felt something settle in her chest. The restlessness that had driven her for years, the sense that she was always running toward or away from something, it quieted, replaced by a certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The celebration afterward was warm despite the autumn chill, full of laughter and stories and the kind of joy that felt earned rather than given. Arya danced with Vincent, who moved surprisingly well for such a large man. She accepted congratulations from people who months ago would have questioned her right to be here. She watched Dante relax in a way she rarely saw, surrounded by people who'd chosen to follow him not from fear but from respect. As night fell and the party wound down, Dante and Arya found themselves alone in the gardens, the sounds of celebration fading behind them. "No regrets?" Dante asked, pulling her close. "Not a single one. You? Just that we wasted 5 years you spent hiding when you could have been here." He kissed her forehead. "But we have time to make up for it." "Is this really our life now? No more crises, no more people trying to kill us, just this?" "I give it 3 months before someone tries something." Dante's smile was wry. "Our world doesn't do peaceful for long, but we'll handle it together, whatever comes." Arya leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. She thought about the terrified bartender who'd saved a stranger's life on impulse, never imagining it would lead here. To love found in impossible places, to family built from people bound by choice rather than blood, to a future that looked nothing like what she'd planned but felt more right than anything she'd imagined. The past was finally, truly buried. Her father's death avenged, his legacy honored in a way that matched who she'd become rather than who he'd wanted her to be. And the future stretched ahead, uncertain and probably violent in places, but faced with someone who understood all of her, the darkness and the light, the fear and the strength, the girl who'd hidden and the woman who'd learned to fight. 3 years after their wedding, Arya discovered she was pregnant. The news arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, delivered by a doctor who had no idea she was telling the wife of the city's most powerful crime lord that she was carrying his child. Arya sat in the sterile office, staring at test results that changed everything, and felt terror and joy in equal measure. She told Dante that night over dinner, watching his face cycle through shock, fear, and finally, fierce joy. "We're having a baby," he said, like testing the words to see if they were real. "We're having a baby," Arya confirmed. "In about 7 months. Plenty of time to panic." "I'm already panicking." But Dante's smile was radiant. A child. Someone to build this all for, to protect, to give a better world than we had. Or someone who inherits our worst traits and becomes a criminal mastermind by age 12? Even better, we can start training early. They laughed, holding each other in the dining room where they'd shared so many meals, and Arya felt the future shift again. This wasn't just about her and Dante anymore. It was about creating something that would outlast them both, about giving their child choices they'd never had. The pregnancy was carefully managed, with security increased and Arya stepping back from operations that might put her at risk. She hated the restrictions but understood them, remembering her own father's paranoia about protecting family. Some fears were worth honoring. Their daughter was born on a spring morning, delivered in a private hospital with enough security to protect a head of state. Dante held her for the first time with hands that had ended lives, but now cradled new life with infinite gentleness, and Arya watched him fall completely in love in the space of a heartbeat. They named her Sophia, after Teresa's daughter, a reminder that mercy and second chances were as much their legacy as power and control. Vincent cried when they told him he'd be godfather. "I'm not good with kids," he protested. "Then you'll learn," Arya said firmly. "She needs people who understand our world, but will teach her to be better than it requires." Raising a child in their world was complicated in ways Arya was still figuring out. Sophia would grow up with resources and privilege, but also with the weight of who her parents were. They'd have to teach her strength without cruelty, power without corruption, how to survive in darkness while staying connected to light. But watching Dante read to their daughter before bed, his dangerous voice soft with fairy tales and lullabies, Arya thought maybe they could pull it off. Maybe two people who'd survived the worst their world offered could raise someone who'd make it better. 5 years after Sophia's birth, on the anniversary of the night Arya had kissed Dante to save his life, they stood together on the mansion's terrace overlooking the city. Sophia was asleep upstairs, watched over by Teresa, who'd returned to their lives as the world's most overqualified nanny. The empire ran smoothly under their joint leadership. Peace held, fragile but real. "Do you ever miss it?" Dante asked. "The simplicity of being nobody, serving drinks, staying invisible?" Arya considered the question honestly. "Sometimes, usually around 3 a.m. when Sophia won't sleep and I'm running on coffee and fear that I'm raising her all wrong." She leaned into him. "But then I remember that woman was slowly dying inside. She was safe but suffocating. This version of me, the one who fights and builds and loves you. She's alive. Messy and complicated and sometimes terrified, but alive. That night when you saved me, did you have any idea where it would lead?" "Not even a little. I thought I'd get fired, maybe arrested, definitely make my life more complicated." Arya smiled. "I didn't think I'd end up married to you, raising your daughter, helping run the organization my father once competed with. Life is strange that way." "Do you think he'd approve? Your father?" It was a question Dante had asked before, but Arya's answer had evolved over the years as she'd made peace with her complicated legacy. "I think he'd see that I chose survival over surrender, that I turned his training into something more than just defense, that I found a partner who respects me as an equal rather than trying to protect me from the world." She looked up at him. "And I think he'd recognize in you someone who understands that power means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. So yes, in his way he'd approve." Dante kissed her, and in that moment, Arya felt the full weight of the journey that had brought her here. From a terrified girl hiding in a closet while her father died, through 5 years of voluntary invisibility, to a single impulsive kiss that had changed everything. She'd lost so much: innocence, safety, the luxury of pretending the world was kinder than it was. But she'd gained more than she'd imagined possible: love, purpose, family chosen and built rather than inherited, a daughter who represented hope for a better future. The city spread out below them like a promise and a challenge, full of people living their lives unaware of the careful balance that kept their world functioning. Arya and Dante maintained that balance, made the hard choices, lived in the shadows so others could walk in the light. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't safe or simple or clean, but it was hers, built from ashes and choice and the refusal to let fear define her future. And as Sophia stirred upstairs, calling for her mother in a sleepy voice that melted every hard edge Arya had developed, she went to her daughter with a heart full of fierce love and the knowledge that she'd finally found what her father had always wanted for her. Not safety, not invisibility, not escape from their world, but the strength to survive it, the wisdom to change it where she could, and the courage to build something beautiful even in its darkest corners. Aria Vale had disappeared the night Michael Rossini died. But Aria Rossini, wife, mother, partner, survivor, had been born from those ashes. Stronger for having broken, wiser for having hidden, more complete for having finally stopped running and chosen to stand her ground. The kiss that had changed everything was just the beginning. The life they'd built from it, that was the real story. And it was far from over.